The author of this fanfiction name is Fanatic06. He works on fanfiction.net and the link is in the description to the stories.
Chapter 54, The Path to the Pokemon League. Grace sighed contentedly at the newest trophy placed neatly on the mantle. It had been almost 2 weeks since Serena had become Grand Duchess of the Battle Chateau. For a while, it was all Grace could talk about. The mother of one didn't waste any time placing the trophy and case of symbols next to all her Rehorn racing awards. With Grace's old life as a Rehorn racer behind her, the Gabina family could now add to the collection with a new set from Serena. Grace was so proud of her daughter. She then looked down at the magazine article in her hands. It was the same one that Callum had given Serena that read about Pokemon performing. Grace must have looked at the article more than Serena had and was definitely enthusiastic about the idea. Serena, on the other hand, wasn't so sure and said she wanted to explore her options. Grace didn't think there was anything wrong with that, of course. Looking once more back at the article, she read it to herself. Aim to be queen. Do your Pokemon have special talents you believe are worth sharing? Can you maximize their potential? Become known across the region with your brilliant performances. Become a Pokemon performer and dazzle the audience. Grace did truly believe that Serena would be good for something like this. For starters, she loved fashion, which was part of the reason she tried out the Battle Chateau to begin with. Grace didn't want to push her daughter, though. She knew that if Serena really found something she wanted to do, she would stick with it and see it through to the end. It's just finding it was the problem. As much as Grace wanted to say Serena got that trait from her, she got it from her father. Mom! A voice called behind her. Grace spun around and saw her daughter standing behind her. Serena had her purse she got from Misty strewn over one shoulder and her backpack on the other. She was holding Tijipai with both her arms. The baby Pokemon had by now gotten used to being away from both its parents at night. The first night Ash had spent the night back at his own house, the Spike Ball Pokemon had cried for hours on end. It was then the two decided to trade nights with Tijipai at each of their house until it finally adjusted. Last night had been Serena's turn. Grace knew this would be the day Serena would accompany Ash to the Pokemon League. It had been wonderful having her home, but now that she was on her journey, she would come and go. Hi, sweetie. I was just musing to myself, Grace smiled. What about? Serena asked as she went over to stand beside her mother. I was thinking about how you've done so well at the Battle Chateau and about anything you might be planning for the future, Grace admitted. I know what you're thinking, Mom. It's not that I think Pokemon performing is a bad thing at all, but it has just come on me so suddenly. I haven't really had a chance to learn much about it, Serena sighed as she looked away from her mother and focused on Tijipai instead. I know. There is no rush. The last thing I would want would be for you to do something you weren't ready for. When the right thing comes along, I know you'll go for it, Grace said. I know I'll be able to find something else. It will probably be even when I least expect it. I mean, I did find out about the Battle Chateau from an advertisement at the Viridian Pokemon Center, Serena said. Of course. You know I'll be proud of you no matter what you do, Grace told Serena. Serena smiled at her mother. She remembered when you was younger, her mother had pushed her so hard to become a Rehorn racer. Despite Serena making it very clear she didn't like it, her mother merely told her that she just wasn't used to it yet. As Serena got older, it was clear that she was serious about not being one. Though initially saddened by that fact, Grace knew she had to let Serena do her own thing. Whatever that may be. Tijpriaini. Tijipai suddenly cried, snapping Serena out of her thoughts. Thanks, Mom, Serena said appreciatively before giving her Grace a quick hug. "I just want what's best for you," Grace replied as she returned it. She then looked down at Serena. "You better hurry over to Ash's house. You don't want to get a late start and arrive at the Pokemon League too late. The opening ceremony starts tomorrow. Right? I'll be home as soon as the Pokemon League is over," Serena said as she ran over to the door and gave a quick wave before heading out. "Bye, Mom. Love you. Love you, too. Tell Ash I wish him the best of luck at the league," Grace called at her daughters retreating back. "Will do," Serena yelled back. Grace smiled once more as Serena left her sight. Yes. Whatever Serena decides to do, she will just fine, she thought. Serena was sprinting down the road towards Ash's house. It had finally been fully repaired and deemed habitable again in the 2 weeks between Serena's mastery of the battle Chateau and now. The Ketchum family had been most appreciative of Serena and Grace opening their home to them during that time, but one could tell they were extremely happy to be back in their own home. As she rounded the driveway, she began to wonder if Ash was even awake yet. True to his word, he had trained extra hard these past 2 weeks. All of that training had worn him out and made him sleep even later than normal. Gary had still preferred to train by himself at who knows where, but the Oak Boy would still be in Pallet Town on occasion to train with Ash. They made sure to only have quick one-on-one or two-on-two battles, however, and save their real strength for the Pokemon League. It wouldn't have been any fun if they unleashed everything they had on each other before then. They were pretty equal in strength from what the practice battles had shown. However, the best training Ash had received so far was from his dad. Red made sure to watch Ash every day this past week and give him pointers. He even had a fun match with Ash at one point. Ash lost of course, but he was still grateful Red had battled him. Despite being able to help Ash with all of his Pokemon, there was one session in particular that really stood out to Serena. It was about Ash's Pikachu and the attacks it was able to use about a week and a half ago. "Alright, Pikachu. Use Thunder," Ash told his rodent partner. Ash was currently at Professor Oak's backyard training with just his Pikachu. Serena was standing to watch from the side. She could tell it was proving to be a frustrating time for both trainer and Pokemon. Despite their efforts, Pikachu simply couldn't use the moves Thunder or Focus Blast despite using them before. The yellow rodent let out a yell as it threw all of its power into its electricity and let it out of its body. Despite this, there wasn't a bolt of lightning that shot out of the sky. All that happened was a thunderbolt. It was very powerful thunderbolt, but still not thunder. This was the typical pattern ever since Ash had seriously trained since coming home. The results were no better with Focus Blast. Pikachu could hardly do anything with that. Ash could almost see the huge question mark that would appear above Pikachu's head at the mention of using the attack. Ash was making sure to be supportive of Pikachu, of course. He was just trying to get to the root of the problem. "It's alright, buddy," Ash said as Pikachu sighed that it missed the thunder again. That was still a really awesome thunderbolt. "Pika Pikachu," Pikachu said with a slight frown. "I know, but I'm sure with enough practice, you'll remember how to use it," Ash encouraged. Ash then heard footsteps treading across the grass to his right. He, Pikachu, and Serena turned to find Red coming towards them. Ash smiled brightly and waved his father over to them, which Red tipped his hat back before reaching them. Despite Red being back for almost a month now, Serena still thought it was so great to see Ash actually be happy to see Red. "Hi, Mr. Ketchum," Serena greeted with a wave once he got closer. Red turned and shot a grin to Serena. "How many times do I have to tell you to just call me Red?" Serena giggled and felt great appreciation for Red's allowance of being so informal with him despite being an adult. Still, her upbringing of formalities simply wouldn't allow her to. All right. Mr. Red it is, she insisted. All right, Serena. You got me. I give up. Red joked as he threw his hands up in mock exasperation. He then reached Ash before crossing his arms and smiling down. Hey there. Son. Hard at training. Yeah, Ash confirmed as he cast a glance at Pikachu. Pikachu and I have been training really hard. Red nodded in response. I've noticed. You've been giving all of your Pokemon one-on-one training sessions and group training and had your undivided attention on them the entire time, which is great. I still can't help but wonder why you seem to be having the most single training sessions with Pikachu. I know it's your first Pokemon, but any particular reason why? There is, actually, Ash sighed before looking back up at his dad. You see, before today, during my gym matches, Pikachu was able to use some really powerful attacks. It was able to use the move Thunder when I faced Sabrina in the Saffron Gym and Focus Blast in my Viridian Gym battle. That's quite impressive, Red complimented while kneeling down to scratch Pikachu's ears, which the rodent appreciated greatly. I really was, Ash agreed. Now, even though Pikachu was able to use those attacks before, it's unable to use them now, no matter how hard we try. We don't know what the problem is. Tell me, Ash, Red began as he looked up from Pikachu to his son. What were the circumstances when Pikachu was able to use these attacks? Well, I know I had my aura activated and was connected with Pikachu and, Ash began, but Red instantly held his hand up to stop him. I think I know what the problem is already, Red said. Riley told me you were already able to use your aura a couple of times before. What's my aura have to do with anything? Ash wondered, Pikachu also cocking its head to the side in curiosity. Isn't it obvious? Red asked. Pikachu was only able to use those attacks because it was boosted by the power of your aura. Oh. Ash inquired as he and Pikachu exchanged glances. That's right. When you use your aura and form a connection with Pikachu, all that extra power you are giving it allows it to use a lot of untapped power that it couldn't use normally. It gets supercharged and thus, able to use very powerful attacks like Thunder and Focus Blast, Red told Ash. Ash mumbled as he thought. It did make a lot of sense, and he should have realized it from the start. Thunder and Focus Blast were some of the strongest attacks a Pikachu could learn. Chuyuo, Pikachu thought, too. So does that mean Pikachu will only be able to use those attacks when I have my aura activated? Ash asked. No. I didn't say that, Red corrected. You have had your Pikachu a little less than a year by now, right? Yeah, but I think it had a couple of trainers before me, Ash muttered. Even so, your Pikachu is still rather young despite having so much heavy battle experience so far. With those two attacks being among the most powerful it can learn, it's only natural that it doesn't remember how to use them under normal circumstances. It would be remarkable if it knew those attacks in such a short amount of time, Red elaborated. I think I get it now, Ash said as realization dawned on his face. Right. It's the same situation with all Pokemon. The more training and battles you do with Pikachu, the more experience it will gain. As it grows more powerful, it will eventually be able to match the level of power it had when boosted by your aura naturally. When that happens, it will be able to learn Focus Blast and Thunder again, Red continued. I see, Ash muttered as he looked down sheepishly at his partner who gave a cheesy grin back. It seemed in their eagerness, they did sort of forget something a little basic. There wasn't anything wrong with Pikachu. It just simply didn't have the experience to use those attacks naturally yet, but it would only grow more powerful in due time. In the meantime, I think I can help you maximize the potential of your Pikachu's electrical attacks, Red spoke up, causing Ash and Pikachu to look at him again. How so? Ash wondered. All of Pikachu's electricity is stored in its cheeks, but I'm sure you already knew that, Red began. As such, that's where most of its power comes from. If you have Pikachu, concentrate all of its power into its cheeks, rather than its whole body, when using an electrical attack, it will be a lot more powerful. Why don't you try it? Oh. Okay, Ash replied before turning to Pikachu. You heard him, Pikachu. Use Thunderbolt. Pikachu nodded before doing as Red told and focused all its power into its cheeks. It could actually feel the pressure that was building inside of that one area. Before, it let the electricity run through its whole body and shot out electrical attacks that way. Now it was a completely new feeling. Unable to hold in the pressure of electricity any longer, it released it. Pikachu you. Pikachu yelled as the thunderbolt exploded from its cheeks. Unfortunately, the pressure had caused it to be a little unstable with its aiming. Whoa! Red cried and hurriedly ducked as the electricity sped right over his head. The stream of electricity continued to speed along and struck a nearby tree. The electricity blew up upon impact, sending bits of bark flying in all directions. Once the smoke cleared, a big gaping hole was in place of the tree where the thunderbolt hit it. Ash, Pikachu, Red, and Serena stared with wide eyes. Heh. Not bad, Red commented as he saw the damage and stood up again. Heh. Sorry, Dad, Ash said embarrassedly, Pikachu mimicking his motions. Don't worry. It's nothing a little practice won't fix. I'm sure in no time, Pikachu will be able to use that technique perfectly. Red smiled with a thumbs up. Yeah. Ash agreed before giving a determined nod to Pikachu. You ready to redouble our training, buddy? Pikachu. The yellow rodent agreed and pumped its fist into the air. Serena's heart warmed from the side as she watched the trio. Just less than a month ago, Ash would hardly have anything to do with his father, but now, here they were. They were like a real father and son as they were supposed to be. Serena snapped out of her thoughts as she reached the door. She rang the doorbell and immediately heard what sounded like a thump come from the one of the second story windows. It seemed to come from Ash's bedroom. Sure enough, a few seconds later, the bedroom window opened and Ash stuck his head out the window to see who rang the doorbell. He gave a smile once he saw who it was. Serena. You're here early. What time is it? Ash asked. It was at that moment the front door was opened and Delia stood there. She saw where Serena's gaze was and stepped out herself to see Ash there. Mom. You're up early, too, Ash commented. It's not early, Ash. Red and I have been awake for a few hours now. It's almost 10 o'clock. We thought you hadn't come downstairs yet because you were busy packing, Delia told him. A look of shock crossed Ash's face as he turned to the clock in his room. Oh, no. I thought I set my alarm for 8. It didn't go off. I'll be right down, he said hurriedly before withdrawing his head back in the window. Serena giggled that the thump she heard must have been Ash falling out of bed. It would have been quite comical to see herself. Despite being a peaceful sleeper, Ash had the funniest ways of waking up sometimes. It was then she remembered she wasn't much different herself. There were times when she was dreaming about Ash and mumbling about him right in front of Misty, or there was the time when Cubone whacked her awake with its bone. Delia then looked down and gestured for Serena to come inside. You're welcome to wait downstairs while Ash is getting ready. Come on in, she said warmly. Serena obliged and stepped in the Ketchum household. Despite being repaired for a while now, it still brought a smile to her face that it looked like nothing ever happened. Any furniture that had been damaged had since been replaced, but thankfully, nothing irreplaceable had been destroyed. She then entered the living room and sat down on the couch. Before Delia spoke next. Was there anything I could get you? Something to eat or drink? Delia offered. No thank you, Mrs. Ketchum, Serena declined politely. Well, Red just went upstairs to help Ash get ready, so hopefully he won't take too long. I need to finish up in the kitchen, but feel free to make yourself at home, Delia said as she disappeared back through the doorway to the kitchen. Serena nodded as she took this time to think about all she had accomplished so far on her journey. It was hard to believe that a little less than a year ago, she wasn't even a trainer yet. She didn't know Charla, Cubone, Jigglypuff, or any of her other Pokémon. It didn't seem that long ago at all. She and Ash had been so naive during that time, but she and Ash had actually matured a lot in that time. Serena still remembered her first day where they were chased by a flock of Spearow and met the villainous Team Rocket. Now, the evil organization was no more. As Serena continued to think, her eyes drifted over to various pictures that were on the wall or above the fireplace. Serena stood up from the couch and wandered over to look at them from lack of something else to do. She smiled as she saw there many pictures of a younger Ash. Sometimes, he was with Red or Delia, or both. Sometimes, it was him alone. Serena smiled that there were a few pictures that she got for Ash's last birthday, too. Some had them alone together or with Leaf and Gary. She then looked at the last picture in the row and stared curiously at it. She never seemed to notice it before despite being in the Ketchum household many times. Like the pictures before it, it showed a younger Ash, but it was before Serena met him. He looked about 5 years old in that picture and was doing his trademark goofy smile with his fingers held up in a V shape. Next to him was apparently Leaf, and Gary was in the picture off to the side with what looked like a scowl. It wasn't any of that which caught Serena's attention, though. There were 2 other people in the photo who looked roughly Ash's age, maybe a little younger. One was a girl who had blue eyes with short brown hair that hung down in what looked like 2 pigtail sections. Serena saw the other was a girl who had blue eyes, too, but it was much darker shade than the other girls or her own. She also had dark blue hair that went almost all the way down her back. The 2 unknown girls were on either side of him and clinging to his arms and smiling brightly. Ash had never mentioned them before, but then again, why would he? Serena knew it was probably none of her business. She heard footsteps and turned to see Ash, Pikachu, and Red coming down the stairs. She knew that Ash was only going to pack light with the bare essentials like he usually did. She briefly wondered if Ash had specifically asked his dad to help him rather than his mom. Delia would probably embarrass him with trying to pack everything known to mankind. Hey, Serena. Thanks for waking me up with that doorbell. I hope you didn't wait too long, he said while scratching his cheek. He then went over and patted Tijupai on the head. It chirped delightfully. Hee. It's fine, Ash. I was just looking at all the pictures of us when we were younger, Serena giggled lightly. Yeah. There sure are a lot of good memories back then, Ash agreed as he went to stand next to her before adding, of course, the best one was our meeting at summer camp. It sure was. Serena replied before she felt a slight blush appearing on her face. Ash noticed Serena's eyes kept flickering back and forth to the picture that he was on with Leaf, Gary, and the 2 unknown girls. Feeling compelled to ask, Ash finally said. Something. Is something wrong? He asked curiously. Serena blushed again at being caught like this. It was pretty embarrassing when you kept giving curious glances at another person's pictures. She could have been a little subtler. Having been asked now, Serena knew she might as well say what was on her mind, though she didn't know why. I was just wondering who those 2 girls in that picture were with you, Serena answered as she pointed. Oh. Ash asked as he looked at the picture himself as he gave them a scrutinizing gaze. I remember their faces, but I can't remember their names or how I know them. You mean you don't know? Red asked, speaking for the first time since coming downstairs. How could I? It looks like it was a long time ago, Ash replied. The brown-haired girl is May Maple and the other is Don Berlitz. Their parents are friends of the family, Red said. May and Don, Ash mused. Yeah. You all got along really well when they visited Pallet Town that one time. You played together all day and showed them all of your Pokemon books. They were really impressed by how much you knew about Pokemon. You were almost like their little mentor, Red added. That sounds like Ash, Serena smiled. He was crazy about Pokemon even before I knew him. Yeah, Ash agreed as he fondly thought back to May and Don. Now that he was being reminded, he remembered the two had been with him and Leaf all day. They played at Ash's house. They played with the Pokemon at Professor Oak's lab. May and Don then got into an argument about who would marry Ash when they grew up. The adults all thought it was really cute. Ash, of course, was clueless to what that was all about. We never get to see the Maple and Berlitz families as often as we like. They live far away in the Hoenn and Sinnoh regions, respectively. Norman Maple is a gym leader in the Hoenn region and Johanna Berlitz was a famous Pokemon coordinator. Despite being retired, she still hosts or judges a lot of contests in Sinnoh, Red continued. The Hoenn and Sinnoh regions, Ash mumbled again. Pika-Pi. His rodent partner questioned. It might be really cool to see those regions one day. There are so many different places to go and Pokemon to see. I can't just limit my sights to Kanto alone, Ash said. That's right. A Pokemon master travels all over the world. Neither your mother or I would approve if you stayed in your home region all the time, Red said and cracked a grin. Well, that settles it. I know what I'm going to be doing when I come home from the Pokemon League. Ash declared. Don't get ahead of yourself, though, Ash. Focus on what's in front of you right now. You have the Pokemon League to win right now. You've trained hard, and I know you'll do great. Red told him. Yeah. I'm going to make you and Mom proud, Ash stated. You already have, Red replied with a contented smile. It was hard for Serena to believe. Ash wasn't even completely finished with the Kanto League, but he already knew what he wanted to do afterwards. Serena, meanwhile, was already finished with her goal, yet still wasn't sure of her goal now. Because the Battle Chateau was still a new thing, it hadn't started in the other regions yet, so she couldn't do it. There. She hated being this pitiful. She was right back to square one. Well, we should be off. I'm already running late and don't want to keep the others waiting. They should be at the lab already, Ash said. Oh. You're leaving. Delia cried as she ran from the kitchen to embrace her son. Be careful, sweetie. Red and I will be coming to the league in a few days to cheer you on. Thanks, Mom, Ash replied as he hugged her back. Goodbye to you, too, Pikachu and Pidgeot. Delia said. Pikachu. Pikachu waved back at the kind woman. Prieyain. Pidgeot chirped, as well. Now, Ash, I need you and everyone else to be really careful going to the Pokemon League, Red said seriously. Victory Road has been plagued by earthquakes recently, so it's even more dangerous than usual. Ash and Serena both nodded. They had heard stories about Victory Road. It was a famous landmark in Kanto that served as the last obstacle to the Pokemon League. It wasn't too scary as long as a competent Pokemon trainer was going through, but a mediocre or beginning trainer would never be able to make it. There were all sorts of strong, wild Pokemon in there. Don't worry, Dad. We'll make sure to stay together, Ash assured as he gave Red a hug. Good. Delia and I will see you once we get there, Red said. You guys aren't worried about leaving the house for a while after what happened? Ash wondered curiously. He hated to be the one to bring it up, but it did concern him. I don't think we have anything to worry about. We'll have this guy to look after the house when we're gone, Red smiled as he took out a Pokeball and released the Pokemon. Inside, Ash and Serena looked curiously to see the Pokemon in question was none other than a Mr. Mime. Mime. It cried. You're Mr. Mime? Ash questioned with a raised eyebrow. Yeah. It's always had a love of cleaning and gardening for some reason which is definitely outside the norm for this Pokemon. When I asked it to watch over the house and take care of the chores, it practically jumped at the opportunity, Red said with a shrug. Ash looked strangely at Red's Mr. Mime. Come to think of it, the imitation Pokemon had been doing a lot of chores since they moved back into their house. It swept, helped his mom with gardening, and even cooked a few meals and was quite good at it. His mom had grown rather fond of it in that time. Our house will be in good hands with Mimey. Delia smiled. It looks like she even gave it a nickname. Sounds good. Ash grinned as he gave a thumbs up to Mr. Mime. Pika-Pie. Pikachu added. Ma'ee-Nime. It replied happily. I guess with that, we'll head off, Ash said as he and Serena turned to leave. Be safe, you two, Delia called after him. We will, Mrs. Ketchum, Serena replied courteously. See you in a little while, Red added. Ma'ee-Im. Mr. Mime waved. Love you, too. See you at the Pokemon League. Ash waved before stepping out the door with Pikachu and Serena. It was now time to go to the Pokemon League. Ash had been waiting for this moment for a long time, ever since he started. It would be his first Pokemon League to compete in. And he was determined to win. He had the greatest friends and Pokemon to help him through this. He was more fired up than ever. Nothing could bring him down. Don't forget to change you-know-whats, sweetie. Delia called. Ash tripped at the statement and blushed in embarrassment. It almost mirrored the first day of his Pokemon journey. Same old mom, he thought. Ash and Serena continued on to Professor Oak's lab where the others were presumably waiting for them. They felt bad that Brock and Misty had to stay there rather than at their houses for the past few weeks, but there simply wasn't enough room at the time. However, the two constantly assured them that it was fine. By staying at the lab, Brock got to study the group's Pokemon more than ever, and for Misty, it was still a paradise for water Pokemon with all the different types there. They were really good sports about it. Serena had dropped her new egg off at Professor Oak's lab the day before for safekeeping while they were at the Pokemon League. The Pokemon professor had assured them he would contact them if anything came up. He doubted it would be necessary, though. From what he could tell, this egg was still many months from hatching. Ash wanted to make one last stop in Professor Oak's backyard before setting off. He had spent much of yesterday giving all of his Pokemon a pep talk but hadn't decided on which ones he would take with him. He was definitely going to make sure to use them all in the Pokemon League. It was just a matter of when. Once the two and Pikachu reached the lab, they could already hear the commotion going on in there. Both his and Gary's Pokemon were probably going crazy with anticipation. The Pokemon were just as excited as their trainers were about the Pokemon League. Ash knocked on the door somewhat heavily to make sure they were heard above the apparent racket going on inside. A few seconds later, Daisy answered the door looking quite worn out. Hey there. Come on in, Daisy said while giving a smile, despite her tired state. As soon as Ash stepped into the lab, he was immediately tackled by all of his Pokemon. Serena had to sidestep out of the way to avoid being in the pile, too. The Pokemon were either hugging him, or in cases like Primeape, were punching him in the arm as a show of affection. Yes. They were eager all right. Tijapai had flown out of Ash's arms in the excitement, but thankfully, Serena caught it. Both your and Gary's Pokemon have been restless all morning. It was hard enough to keep them in the same room. He left just a short while ago with Leaf. Professor Oak told Ash. They left without me? Ash questioned from underneath all the Pokemon. I'm afraid so. You know how impatient my grandson can be. Leaf wanted to stay and wait for you but ended up going with Gary so he would have someone to accompany him. There, Professor Oak answered. Ash was about to say something again but all the Pokemon on top of him made it difficult. Alright, guys. It's great to see you. I'm really excited for the Pokemon League, too, but I can't go anywhere if you all don't get off me. Ash cried. Finally realizing the truth of Ash's words, his Pokemon got off him and gave him some room. Ash sat up and panted heavily before standing up. He then dusted himself off with Serena helping him before looking at the Pokemon in front of him. Only Pikachu and Dratini remained by Ash. Pikachu was on his shoulder and Dratini was rubbing affectionately against his leg. I know you all want to battle for me as quickly as possible, but I can only take 6 of you with me at first, but I promise, all of you will fight at some point, Ash assured them. His Pokemon nodded, ready for him to go on. I've decided to take Pikachu, Krabby, Dratini, Aerodactyl, Wartortle, and Bulbasaur with me for the first couple of matches, Ash announced. All of his Pokemon nodded once more at Ash's decision. Krabby, Aerodactyl, Bulbasaur, and Wartortle stepped forth, and Ash called them to their Pokeballs. He then called Dratini to its Pokeball from against his leg. With that, he was finally ready to set out. Make sure you guys root for me while you're here, Ash told them. Trust me. I probably won't be able to keep them away from the TV set. Professor Oak laughed. Brock and Misty then went over to Ash and gave him a nod, signifying they were ready, too. They had stood by Ash his entire journey throughout Kanto, and they weren't going to stop now. Brock placed his hands on Ash's shoulders and gave him a smile. We're all here for you and know you'll do great, Ash. Let's go see you get that first place trophy, he said. Thanks, Brock, Ash replied before turning on his heel for the door. Our lucky star is shining today. Let's go. With that, Ash and Pikachu took off running out the door as fast as he could. He could barely contain his excitement as he left. Serena said a quick goodbye to Professor Oak and Daisy before taking off herself. Brock and Misty were normally exasperated about the two's eagerness for some things, but let it slide this time. They smiled to themselves at Ash's determination before giving a quick goodbye to Professor Oak and Daisy also before leaving. Professor Oak, Daisy, and the rest of Ash's Pokemon watched the quartet leave and sighed in contentment. Ash and Gary are just like Red and my dad before they entered their first Pokemon League. Red won his first try and Dad got second place. Do you think it will be a repeat, Grandpa? Daisy asked Professor Oak. Those two are going to do their very best. I believe with all the things they have experienced on their journey, they will do very well. Both Ash and Gary will make Pallet Town proud, Professor Oak answered. The group now stood at the entrance of a cave. Honestly, it looked no more threatening than MT Moon or the Seafoam Islands had when the group first entered those a while back. The group knew better by now to know that looks can be deceiving. They hadn't exactly had a great experiences in caves in the past, with the exception of meeting Articuno. It didn't really help matters with Red telling them the area had been active with earthquakes recently. They didn't know why, but every year before the Pokemon League began, it was when earthquakes were most frequent in there. It was like nature knew that this is the time when most trainers came through the area, so the earthquakes happened to make things more difficult. Of course, the group knew this wasn't the only way to the Indigo Plateau, the site of the Pokemon League. There was a long way to get there by going through Viridian City, and if the group wasn't so short on time, they might have taken that route instead. It was too late to turn back now, though. They were already in front of Victory Road and would need to overcome it. "You guys ready?" Ash asked as he pulled down the brim of his hat for emphasis. "I suppose we're as ready as we'll ever be," Misty muttered. "Ash," Serena trailed. She still remembered how she had almost died the last time they went through a cave with earthquakes. Ash seemed to know what Serena was thinking as he turned to her and placed his hands on her shoulders and stared deep into her eyes. Serena looked back and once again saw no trace of deception in his eyes as he spoke his next words. Ash then pulled her into a hug. "I promise, Serena. If anything happens, I'll make sure you stay safe." "I'm never letting go of you like that ever again," Ash stated. Serena let out a sigh of contentment at his words. She knew she could always count on Ash. "Will you stay by me the whole time we're in there?" Serena asked hopefully. "Of course. Stay close to me," Ash said gently before they set off inside the cave known as Victory Road, Brock and Misty following them. Victory Road was dark. That was the best way to describe it once they entered. Mt. Moon had the artificial lights to help light the way while the Seafoam Islands had the glittering jewels to light it up. Victory Road had nothing. Well, the group could see a little bit, but nowhere near as well as they would like. They would need to be extra careful. If there was a sudden pit, they wouldn't see it coming. As if to emphasize this point, Misty tripped over a rock sticking up from nowhere and fell flat on her stomach. She groaned in and looked at the offending rock before discovering it was actually a Geodude. It gave an annoyed expression at Misty before hopping off. "Hey, Misty. You all right?" Brock asked as he helped her to her feet. "Yeah. I'll be fine. I don't think I'm bleeding anywhere," Misty said as she dusted herself off. "I know Victory Road is full of wild Geodudes, but I hope they aren't going to be all over the main path like that one." "They probably are, actually," Brock murmured as the group continued on. "We really needed a lantern for this place. I should have packed one before coming." "I've got it." Ash suddenly spoke. "I may not have my Charizard with me right now, but you still have yours, Serena. It can help light the way." Of course, Serena remembered on how they didn't think it sooner. "Come on out, Charla." She then pulled out Charla's Pokeball and released it. The fire-breathing dragon gave a stretch of its wings before looking expectantly at Serena. "Charla, we need you to use your tail flame as a guide for us," Serena told it. Charla nodded before grabbing its tail and holding it out in front of it. The area around the group was instantly illuminated. Though it was still fairly dark, the group could see much better than they could a little while ago. At least they would be able to see any Geodude in their paths, or bottomless pits. "How long is this cave supposed to be anyway?" Misty suddenly asked as they walked along. "We should be out of here by the evening. After that, it's just a couple of hours to the Indigo Plateau. If we're lucky, we should be able to spend the night at one of the Pokemon Center there. Thankfully, the Pokemon League knows there will be many people there, so they have more than one," Brock answered. "That will put us in plenty of time for the opening ceremony tomorrow. I can hardly wait." Ash cheered. "What's the opening ceremony supposed to be like, Ash?" "I've seen the matches on TV, but never the opening," Serena asked. "It's really awesome. During the whole Pokemon League, a really huge flame burns on top of the biggest stadium there. It's said to come from the body of a Moltres itself. They light it the very first day, and then there's a huge party to celebrate." Ash exclaimed. "The legendary bird, Moltres?" Serena echoed in amazement. "How would they know if the flame came from Moltres?" Misty asked a little skeptically. Did they take it from molters themselves? It's just a legend, Misty, Brock interjected. The legend goes that a long time ago, on the night of the very first Pokemon League tournament ever, molters appeared above the stadium. Everybody was completely amazed by the sight of it. It flapped its wings so majestically. Every flap sent out a dazzling pattern of flames, lighting up the night sky. The flames from its wings eventually settled into center of the stadium and burned continuously. They say it never stopped until the tournament ended. Now, it's become a tradition to have a flame lit on the night of the opening ceremony. Molter's virtues of majesty and power reflect the fierce competitors. Wow, Serena muttered. As I said before, it's just a legend, Brock reiterated. I bet it's true, Ash commented. After seeing Articuno in the Seafoam Islands, there's no reason not believe it's not out there somewhere. Molters would really be a sight to see. I bet it's beautiful, Misty said. Well, no one knows exactly where Molters stays. Articuno was always rumored to be in the Seafoam Islands somewhere, but where Zapdos and Molters are is complete mystery. Brock mused. Does that mean they're always on the move? Serena asked. No. They definitely have a place to rest, too. They are just so seldom seen that no one knows for sure. I bet we were the only ones to see Articuno in a long time, Brock said the last part as an afterthought. Leave it to Brocco to know this stuff. Ash smiled. It was then Charla let out a low growl and stopped. The group turned to look in surprise at it before following its gaze and gasped. Standing before them appeared to be at least 4 Machoke that were blocking the way forward, and it was clear they weren't just casually in the area like a Geodude. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were facing forward with very determined stares, almost like statues. That's really weird, Brock mumbled. There aren't supposed to be any wild Pokemon blocking the main pathway through Victory Road like this. Hey, Machoke. Ash called, drawing the superpowered Pokemon's attention to him. Will you please let us through? We need to get to the Indigo Plateau. Chook, one of them uttered while shaking its head. It then pointed forward with its index finger, signaling that the group turn back the other way. Well, what do you suppose we do, guys? Are there any other paths we can take to get through here? Ash asked. Charla would have none of that, though. It stomped its feet angrily before roaring and glared at the Machoke. Upon seeing the hostile expression, the 4 Machoke narrowed their eyes and took on a defensive stance. They then growled warningly at Charla, ready to fight if necessary. Charla then let out a puff of smoke from its nose and looked prepared to fight. It then turned back towards to Serena to see if she would issue a command, but was surprised she didn't. Wait, Charla! Serena cried as she ran up to it. It's probably not the best idea to get involved in a pointless fight with these Pokemon. I don't think their intentions for doing this are bad. As if for confirmation, Serena looked towards the 4 Machoke to see their reaction. The one that had spoken earlier, presumably the leader, slowly nodded its head. It then muttered something before eyeing Charla cautiously again. What's it saying, Pikachu? Ash asked. Pika-Pi Pikachu, Pikachu said. So there is another way, and Machoke told you where to go? Ash asked, getting the gist of what it was saying. Pikachu, it confirmed. See, Charla. These Machoke aren't bad Pokemon. They probably have a very good reason for doing what they're doing, Serena reasoned with it. Charla let out another puff of smoke before sighing and turning away from the Machoke. Taking the hint that they weren't going to be attacked anymore, the Machoke let up on their defensive stances and stood stock still once again. I don't really think those Machoke are blocking our way. It looks more like they're guarding something, Brock said. What do you think it is? Ash inquired. Who knows, but I doubt they'll tell us even if we asked. Let's just go the other way, Brock suggested. Can we take a break first? My feet are killing me. We've been walking all day, and my foot still hurts from that gooey dude I tripped over, Misty requested. Ash, Serena, and Brock cast a glance back at the Machoke, who gave no sign they saw any problem with that. The Pokemon clearly were going to leave the group alone as long as they left them alone. The Machoke gave a brief look at them before staring ahead once again. I guess that's okay. I could use a break myself, Ash decided. The group then went over to a nearby wall of the cave and sat down. Misty gave a contented sigh. She gently began to massage her foot in an effort to make feel better faster. Do you need any ice for that, Misty? I'm sure Krabby or one of your water Pokemon can make some, Ash asked her. No, thanks. I'll be fine, Misty assured. Serena took this time to pull a bottle out of her backpack and feed Tijipai. The spike ball Pokemon hadn't had anything since breakfast and was getting a little fussy. It eagerly accepted the bottle and took to getting its fill. Brock opened up his backpack and pulled out a map to see their current location. He was glad he had purchased a map of Victory Road while they were in Viridian City last time. It was normally a straight shot through here, but unforeseen circumstances like this made a map necessary. If there was another way to go, as the Machoke had said, it would definitely show up. Charla had come over and shined its flame over the map to give him enough light. Find anything, Brock? Ash asked as he kneeled beside him to look at the map. Serena joined him while still feeding Tijipai. Misty scooted over, too. I never realized what a maze this cave really is, Brock commented as he studied it. Can you even tell where we are right now? Serena asked this time as she sat down Tijipai to get a better look. We haven't really taken any detours and have stayed pretty much on the main path. We are on a long straight path right now. I think that will put us about right here. Brock answered, indicating the location with his index finger. Then where is the other path? Ash questioned. Brock traced along the map with his finger while giving his answer. Judging by what Pikachu says, there is a place to take a left about 50 yards back from where we came. We'll then need to take another left, and then the second right, and then the third left, and then another right, which will put us back on the main path. Could you repeat that? It sounds a little complicated, Misty said dully. I think it's better if I just keep the map out as we go, Brock decided with a sheepish grin. Sounds good. Let's go. Ash commented as he stood up and Pikachu went to leap on his shoulder. Right. Serena agreed as she went to pick up Tijipai, only to discover it wasn't there. Tijipai. She then glanced wildly around. She couldn't believe it. She had taken her eyes off of Tijipai for 1 second, and it's already walked off. Her eyes then spotted the spike ball. Pokemon. It was waddling around the four Machoke while chirping happily, not having a clue what it was doing. Tijipai. Serena yelled as she ran for it. The four Machoke immediately tensed up as they saw Serena coming closer. Serena didn't seem to pay them any mind as she continued to run to it. Her eyes widened in horror as she saw Tijipai enter a small tunnel that was just behind the Machoke. She made a dive for it, but Tijipai was already inside. She missed and landed on the ground painfully. She was about to go after it, but 4 pairs of blue feet stepped into her path. Serena tilted her head up worriedly and saw the 4 Machoke glaring down at her, as if daring her to get any closer. Please. That's my Tijipai. It's just a baby. I have to go after it. Serena pleaded frantically. Chuauk, they uttered threateningly. Don't you get it? Ash suddenly shouted, coming to the rescue. We have get it back. I don't know why you are blocking this path, and frankly, I don't care right now. The only Thing that matters is that we go get Tijipai. Let us through. Pikachu. Pikachu added with Charla letting out a low roar. Maaachuk, they growled and took on defensive stances. I don't think they are going listen to reason, Ash, Brock muttered as he and Misty joined him and Serena. Ash grit his teeth. He really didn't want to attack these Pokemon, but it looked like there was no choice. It was probably something important, but to them, getting to Tijipai was more urgent. It couldn't even defend itself yet. Sorry about this, Ash said to the Machoke before giving his next order. Pikachu, Thunderbolt. The electric mouse unleashed the powerful jolt of electricity from its cheeks, shocking all of the Machoke. Charla then flew forward and kicked the Machoke backwards with its large feet. They weren't looking to knock out the Machoke, just stun them long enough to get by. Now! Ash yelled as they ran by the Machoke before Brock and Misty went into the tunnel, with Misty being noticeably slower because of her foot. Serena quickly returned Charla, since it was too big for the tunnel, and went in next. The tunnel was rather wide, so all four of them could fit in side by side. The only problem is, it was small enough in height to where they would have to crawl on their stomachs. The Machoke got up off ground and looked extremely angry. They let out a battle cry as one of them picked up a large boulder and hurled it at the group. Ash was about to go in the tunnel last, but had to jump out of the way to avoid being hit. That boulder would definitely be powerful enough to break a few of his bones if it hit. Unfortunately, that leap placed him farther away from the tunnel. Come on, Ash! Serena cried from inside the tunnel. Ash started running for the tunnel once more as the Machoke ran towards him. Ash was silently praying he was fast enough. He really didn't want to figure out what those Machoke would do if they caught him, probably rip him in half. Maybe it wasn't the best idea to attack them like that, but he knew they had no choice since talking to them wasn't working. Ash reached the hole before dropping down on his stomach and crawling as fast as he could to get under the hole. He glanced back and his eyes widened in terror as he saw the Machoke were gaining on him quickly now. He forced himself to forward and saw the terrified faces of his friends as he got his body under more and more. He knew the Machoke were really close, judging by their expressions. Ash just got the last part of his foot in and heard one of the Machoke's fists thunder onto the ground behind him, just missing him. Keep going! Ash yelled to the rest of them now that they were all inside the tunnel. Thankfully, the Machoke were too bulky to fit inside the tunnel. That didn't stop them from trying, however. Several hands shot through the opening of the tunnel and groped around, trying to catch anything they could. The group continued to crawl nonetheless until they were finally out of range of the furious Machoke. They could hear the Machoke bellowing angrily behind them and let out a sigh of relief now that they made it. That was way too close, Ash panted. Come on, Brock urged gently. Let's try to catch up with Tijipai. The group nodded and continued crawling forward. Now that Charla was back in its Pokeball, it was almost pitch black again, especially since they were in an enclosed tunnel. They couldn't even see a few feet in front of them. Do you hear Tijipai anywhere, Pikachu? Ash asked the rodent beside him. Pikachu, it replied with a shake of its head. Ash couldn't see the gesture but could tell from the tone of Pikachu's voice that it was a negative. I'm a horrible parent. I'm a horrible parent, Serena berated herself and sniffed a little bit. I took my eyes off of Tijipai for 1 second, and this happened. It wasn't just your fault, Serena. We're all to blame, Ash told her. Tijipai was my responsibility at the time since I had it. If something happens to it, it will be all my fault. Serena cried as tears started to fall freely from her face. We're going to find Tijipai. It couldn't have gone far, Ash said. He couldn't see her tears but could tell she was crying from her sobs. That doesn't change the fact that I'm a horrible parent, Serena mumbled. How could you call yourself that? You're excellent to Tijipai. Misty stated, trying to console her. That's right. Just look how Cubone turned out, Brock reminded. I don't think I could have raised that Pokemon better myself. Tijipai completely trusts you, Serena. If it didn't, it wouldn't get so excited every time you hold it and spend time with. It loves you. Isn't that good enough in the end to know if you are a good parent or not? That's what you told me when Tijipai first hatched, remember? Ash asked. Serena sighed to herself. She felt a little better after hearing them say that to her, but she still wasn't fully convinced. Once they found Tijipai and knew it was okay, then she could forgive herself. How far does this tunnel go anyway? Misty asked rhetorically as they crawled along. It seemed to be a straight path because there were no forks in the passage as far as they group could tell. Surely they would be able to find Tijipai sooner or later. That was until their bodies met thin air. Whoa! Ash cried as he and everyone else immediately plunged straight down through pitch black. Ash! Serena screamed as she frantically swiped her hands around, hoping to find at least something to grab onto. The group continued to scream as they fell further and further. What made the fall even scarier was they had no idea where they were going. It was nothing but total blackness all around them as they fell. They had no idea if this was a bottomless pit or they would die on impact. All they knew was this was probably the end for them. After falling for a few more seconds, the group felt themselves hit what felt like water. There was a resounding splash as they went under. Ash coughed violently as he threw his head up and broke the surface. He was speeding along with what was apparently a current of water. He was extremely dizzy from the impact and felt his eyes droop. He had no idea what had become of the others but knew he had to stay awake. Come on, Ash thought to himself tiredly as everything became blurry. Despite his best efforts, it wasn't long before he passed out. Ash groaned as his eyelids fluttered open. How long had he been out? Had it been several hours? The last thing he remembered was being carried off down in the depths of the cave in a current. How had he survived that? Furthermore, how was he on dry ground now? He felt a small being licking his hand, and it didn't take a genius to know. It must be Pikachu. Hey, Pikachu, Ash mumbled dazedly. Pika-Pi. The yellow rodent cried in excitement at seeing its trainer awake. Ah, you're awake, a rather deep voice said. Ash's eyes shot open at the unfamiliar voice as he sat up and glanced wildly around. Before his senses could fully adjust, he felt a strong hand gently push him back to the ground. Easy there, lad. You and your friends took quite a tumble, another voice said soothingly and seemed to belong to an older woman. Ash felt his blurry vision start to settle, and he found himself looking at 4 adult faces. They looked familiar, but he couldn't recall where he saw them before in his dazed state. Upon seeing him come to, the 4 adults backed off to give him space. Ash made sure to slowly sit up this time and let out another cough before taking in the sight of the people before him. The first one was a young woman with dark red hair tied into a ponytail. She wore glasses and had on a black sleeveless shirt with a purple skirt. The person next to her was a rather large and bulky man with spiky black hair. He wore no shirt which exposed his extremely large muscles and white pants secured with a black belt. He was probably the one with the deep voice. The next one was an older woman with graying blonde hair and wore a purple dress that reached her ankles. The last of them was a young man with spiky red hair and wore a full blue uniform complete with a cape. It almost looked like something a superhero would wear. Ash's memory jarred with recognition at the faces. These people in front of him were the members of the Elite Four: Lorelei, who specialized in ice types; Bruno, who specialized in fighting types; Agatha, who trained mainly ghost types and Lance, who mastered in the dragon type Pokemon. He was actually face to face with them. How was this possible? What were they doing here? Was he dreaming? Ash took a good look at his surroundings and saw he was still in the cave. This part wasn't pitch black like the others. It was actually well lit, but what was causing it? You're the Elite Four. Ash blurted out stupidly. Yes. We are, Agatha, the older woman, confirmed. What are you guys doing here? Ash blurted out again. I think a better question is what are you doing down here? You shouldn't be here, the red-haired man, Lance, answered. Ash could feel the slight threat in the voice and decided to answer as best as he could. He needed to calm down and was being quite rude at having such an encounter after almost falling to his death. Well, Ash began, but was caught off by more moaning behind him. Ash quickly turned his head, discovered Serena, Brock, and Misty slowly pushing themselves up. He had almost forgotten they were there this whole time in all of the confusion. Ash hastily crawled over to them and helped prop Serena up with his hands. Hey. It looks like you guys are waking up, Ash said. Wait, Ash. Serena questioned as she looked at him with half-closed eyes. We're actually alive. Yeah. I don't know how, but we somehow survived, Ash replied. That would be my doing, the young, red-haired woman spoke up. We saw you all being carried off by the stream, and you were close to drowning. I had my dugong and Cloister dive in and save all of you. Brock, Misty, and Serena's eyes then shifted over to the voice and gasped in surprise at who it was. They were in just as much shock as Ash was at first. What? The Elite Four of Kanto. What's going on? Brock asked in amazement. Yeah. I don't understand either, Ash muttered. Serena was just about to say something when a familiar chirp reached her ears. She glanced around and immediately put on a joyful expression. Tijipai was waddling towards them, looking extremely happy at seeing its parents again. Ash, Serena, and Pikachu immediately ran towards the spike ball Pokemon, and Serena picked it up as she, Ash, and Pikachu gave it a big hug. Oh, Tijipai. I'm so glad you're safe. You have no idea how worried I was. Serena cried. Priein. It laughed like it didn't know it was missing in the first place. So that Tijipai is yours, I presume? Agatha asked. Yes, it is. Serena confirmed. I see. It wandered in here a short while after we saved you. Smart little thing finding this place. We were going to care for it, but it looks like there's no need now, Agatha said. Now that all of the formalities are out of the way, we need to know how and why you are here, Lance stated. No one is supposed to be down here right now. Are your intentions pure or not? We're down here by complete accident. Ash cried frantically. We had no idea anyone or anything was down here. I find it impressive that you made it past my Machoke. They were supposed to be guarding this area, Bruno, the bulky man, mused. Realization dawned on the group's face as they understood. It turned out those Machoke really were there for a purpose, after all. The group couldn't help but wonder why. Though. Were they guarding anyone from meeting the Elite Four? No. That would be rather silly. It had to be something much more than that. Man. Those Machoke could have killed me, Ash muttered before sighing in relief as he remembered how close he was to being captured. I highly doubt that. My Machoke don't kill. They might have knocked you unconscious for a few days for trying to get past them, though, Bruno answered. You young ones still haven't answered our question about why you're down here, Agatha interjected, seeing as everyone was going off topic. As I said before, it's a complete accident, Ash repeated. That's right. We came upon the path that the Machoke were guarding. They told us to turn back, which we're about to do, but decided to take a break first. Before we knew what had happened, Tajapai had wandered off into a tunnel, and we had to chase after it. The Machoke tried to hold us back, so we had no choice but to attack them and make a run for it. Once we got into the tunnel, we fell down a large pit and into a current of water. The next thing I know is we woke up here, Serena explained. The Elite Four members gave the group a hard stare. It looked like they were trying to determine if they were telling truth. After a couple of seconds, the four looked at each other and nodded their heads. They lost their tense looks and instead smiled at the group. Okay. We believe you. You certainly don't look like criminals, so you can relax now, Lance said. The group breathed another sigh of relief upon hearing that. Getting into confrontation with the Elite Four was definitely not an experience they wished to go through. There were still many questions going through their heads, though. So where are we anyway? Misty inquired. You are in some of the deepest depths of Victory Road. Very few people even know about this area, Lorelei answered. Not to be nosy or anything, and you don't have to answer, but what are all of you doing here? I wouldn't think the members of the Elite Four would be down somewhere in Victory Road of all places, Ash muttered. Ash. Show some respect. Misty hissed. It's none of our business. It's probably best if we just leave, Brock agreed. The Elite Four members looked at each other once again. They each had a small hint of uneasiness on their faces as they turned back to the group. It looked like they were going to choose their words carefully. Since you're down here, there is really no way out except forward, so you'll need to come with us. There's no other way, Lorelei sighed. That's right. We are about to show you a very well-kept secret. We need each your words that you will never ever tell anybody about this, Lance said seriously. Of course. We promise. We understand we were never supposed to be here in the first place, Ash answered. I won't tell anyone, either, Serena said. Or me, Brock added. I promise, too, Misty finished. Pika-Pi. Pikachu added for good measure. Very well. Please follow us, Lance ordered gently as they turned around and headed forward. The group followed closely behind. They traveled through the corridors in utter silence. It was rather unnerving for the group to be in the presence of the Elite Four like this. They honestly believed they would never meet them in person like this, but here they were in strangest of places. The group didn't quite know what to say to the Elite Four. Praising them about how they were huge fans of all of them didn't quite seem like the proper thing to say given the circumstances. Surprisingly, Agatha spoke first. You children look rather familiar, she stated as they walked along. If I'm not mistaken, aren't you two Brock Harrison, the gym leader of Pewter City, and Misty Waterflower, 2 of the gym leaders of Cerulean City? Misty and Brock stared in surprise. Well, maybe it wasn't that surprising. Being former gym leaders, they had met the Elite Four on occasion during special conferences between all the gym leaders of Kanto in the past. Still, to be recognized seemed quite an honor. Yes, that's us. Brock spoke up before continuing. Well, I used to be the gym leader, but now my dad is running the gym while I'm traveling to be the world's greatest Pokemon breeder. A Pokemon breeder, you say? Agatha mused. That's quite a goal to pursue. I'm currently not the gym leader, either, Misty said. I'm on a journey trying to be the best water-type trainer I can be. So you train water Pokemon? Lorelei asked kindly. I do. Forgive me if I sound rude, but you were a huge inspiration for me to be my best, Lorelei. Misty exclaimed. HMM. How nice of you to say, Lorelei said with a smile. The group couldn't help but notice she seemed a lot more relaxed than the other members of the Elite Four. Maybe It was just her personality. I think I've seen you on TV before, too. Lorelei spoke again, this time addressing Serena. If I'm not mistaken, you conquered the battle chateau. Serena Gabina, correct? Oh, yes I did, ma'am. Serena answered hurriedly. Say now. Congratulations on your victory, lass, Agatha told her. Thank you very much, Ms. Agatha. Serena replied. She was very flustered at receiving praise from the Elite Four themselves, and they actually knew her name. Are any of you planning on participating in the Pokemon League? You were on Victory Road, after all, Lance pointed out. Yes, sir. That would be me. My name's Ash Ketchum, Ash answered. Ash Ketchum? You must be the son of Red Ketchum, Lance figured. That's right. Do you know my dad? Ash wondered. Of course we do. He beat all of us a while back. He was a great trainer indeed, Agatha replied. Wow, Ash. Your dad beat the Elite Four? Misty asked, clearly impressed. Ash then remembered that his father had told him about all of his victories in the past when he was younger. Beating the Elite Four of Kanto had been one of those achievements. Now that Ash thought of it, he wondered if his father ever traveled to the other regions like Hone or Sinnoh. Did he win any leagues there at all? Just what was it his father was doing in all this time? Ash knew it was good reason but still wished he knew. So you got all 8 badges. Well done, Bruno nodded in approval while changing the subject. Thank you, but it was my Pokemon that got me this far. They battled extremely hard for me. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be anywhere. Right, Pikachu. Ash said. Pikachu. It responded happily. That's true. My Pokemon battled for me because they cared. I owe so much to them, Serena agreed. The Elite Four exchanged glances upon hearing that and smiled. Lance then turned back and gave the group an approving nod. It seems all of you have very strong bonds with your Pokemon. You realize what it truly means to be a great trainer. Most people would say it's because of how strong they are. Which is why they win. All of you, on the other hand, know that your strength comes from you Pokemon, Lance told them. It's an uncommon trait to find in trainers these days, Agatha commented. Thank you so much. Ash exclaimed. You don't need to thank us. We are just pointing out what you already have, Lorelei said. As they continued to walk along, the group could feel the temperature rising slightly, but it wasn't near as bad as the time they were in the volcano on Cinnabar Island. The corridor was also steadily getting brighter. They had a feeling that whatever they were heading to would be the source of what was lighting up this part of the cave. It must be very powerful to give off so much light. Okay. We're getting close. It's going to be a bit of shock on what you'll see, but try not startle it, Lance told them. The group nodded. They couldn't help but be highly curious at what they were going towards. The light was getting very bright now as they rounded another bend. The path went on for a little longer before opening up into another large room. Upon entering, the Elite Four motioned for the group to stop as they kept walking. It wasn't long before they stopped, too, and looked upward. The group followed their gazes and let out a gasp of surprise. What stood before them was an extremely amazing sight. With wings as majestic as royalty, they gave small embers. With each flap, creating a flash. It had a large, flowing head crest and billowing tail with each seeming to be made of fire. It was one of the 3 legendary birds, Moltres. I can't believe it. It's Moltres, Serena spoke in amazement. So it lives here in Victory Road in a part where no trainers go, Misty commented in equal awe. The group couldn't believe their eyes. This was just as amazing as when they saw Articuno in the Seafoam Islands. Moltres gave a light cry at the appearance of the humans and 2 Pokemon. It then slowly made its way to the ground before letting its talons hit the stone floor. It then lowered its head to listen what they had to say. It was apparently familiar with the Elite Four before it. "Hello, Molters. We of the Elite Four have come once again to ask that give us a flame from your wings to light the ceremony fire for the Pokemon League," Lance introduced. The group looked on completely surprised. That was what the Elite Four were down here for. They were asking Molters for its flame. The legend really was true, after all. How many other people knew of this practice? Until now, the group thought the flame at the Indigo Plateau was just a normal fire, and the Molters legend was just for fun. Ash had a sneaking suspicion it was true, but it was still quite different to actually see it with his own eyes. Molters nodded its head and gave another light cry in response. It then slowly rose into the air and began flapping its wings, once more creating a flash. The flames danced along through the air in such a powerful and graceful way. One would normally be afraid with the large amount of fire in the air right now, but the group somehow knew that Molters' flames wouldn't hurt them. It was as if Molters chose how to use its flames, sort of like how someone rode a Ponyta or Rapidash. The Elite Four glanced back and noticed the group's surprised expressions. Agatha gave a light chuckle before commenting on it. "You four seem surprised. You've never heard of the legend of Molters' flame?" she inquired. "It's not that we've never heard it. We're just amazed it's really happening and that we're witnesses to it," Brock answered. "Not many people see this," Bruno said. "The only ones who know about this are us Elite Four, the president of the Pokemon League, and the region champions, like Blue Oak. Normally, Blue will accompany us also, but he was busy with other things this year." "So Gary's dad knew about this, too," Ash mumbled. He wondered since his dad beat the Elite Four if he knew. The Elite Four didn't mention he did, but it also wasn't necessary. "Exactly." Lance brought out a large torch before presenting it in front of Molters. The many beautiful embers showered around the group but caused no burns or caught onto anything. Finally, a rather large one settled perfectly on top of the torch. The item was immediately lit and began to burn brightly. It was quite an impressive sight to watch this. "Thank you for your kindness in this favor, Molters. We hope to honor you with another glorious year of battles," Lance said with a bow. Molters settled back onto the ground before bowing back at Lance and the other Elite Four members. It was then it took a good look at the other occupants in the room. Molters got a fascinated expression on its face as it believed it remembered hearing about these other humans somewhere. If it recalled correctly, one of its brethren, Articuno, had told it about them. They certainly fit the description from what Articuno had said. It said that there was more to them than meets the eye. Ash muttered when he noticed Molters looking straight at him and Serena. "This is amazing. I think Molters may be wanting to speak to you," Lance told them in surprise. Ash and Serena both nervously stepped forward before they were right in front of Molters. What on earth could a legendary bird have to say to them? It was quite overwhelming. They glanced back and saw that Brock, Misty, and the Elite Four were just as surprised as they were. They gasped as they heard what sounded like another powerful voice in their head. "You were a part of the group who avoided a crisis with Mew's clone, weren't you?" the voice asked, presumably Molters. "Yes. It was us," Ash said aloud. He and Serena both knew that Molters was able to communicate with them because of their aura and psychic abilities, but they had no idea how to respond back telepathically right now despite doing it before. "Articuno was right about you. It informed me that it sensed something special with each of you when you encountered it. You two may very well have a large role in saving the world when the time comes," Molters continued with a nod. "Wait. Where did that come from? Didn't we do that already with Mewtwo?" Ash asked with confusion. "No. This is something much greater than even that. The actions of Mutuo were certainly a threat, but it is nothing compared to what's to come. What is coming in the future is pure evil, Molters said. Both Ash and Serena grimaced at that. Pure evil? Certainly Molters wasn't talking about Team Rocket. They were no more. They didn't think they could ever meet a man who was more evil than Giovanni. Was it possible there was someone or something out there that was worse? As if reading their minds, Molters continued. What I am talking about has not yet come to fruition. When it does, we are going to need all the help we can get. You two are key in stopping this. What is it exactly? Serena asked. Young girl, we do not know yet as it is still too early. Our visions only allow us to know that a disaster is coming, but they don't allow us to see what it is yet, unfortunately. It is too far away, Molters answered with regret. So how far away is it? Ash asked. It is still years away, but we give you this warning now so you will be ready when the time comes. As you are now, neither of you are equipped to handle what is to come but will be in due time, Molters said. It must be referring to our aura and psychic powers, Ash whispered to Serena, who nodded back. Yes. I am, Molters suddenly said in their heads, causing them both to jump. It then took on a serious tone again. Train hard until that time comes. We will inform you as the crisis draws closer. May we meet again in the future. Wait. Why us? Ash cried. What was it that made him or Serena so special that they were picked for something like this? Because you are the chosen ones, Molters answered. You will know what that means in due time. Getting the feeling that the conversation was over, Ash and Serena made their way back to the others, each thinking the same thing. It was certainly a cryptic message. What could Molters possibly be talking about? According to it, whatever evil there was out there hasn't come to power yet, so they didn't know what it was. All of the legendaries appeared to be in on it, including Mew and Mutuo when they offered assistance to Ash should he ever need it. Articuno had apparently told Molters about them already. They found it strange that it hadn't said anything to them when they met it. Perhaps it had just awoken and needed to adjust its powers. Ash, what was that all about? Misty wondered as she scrunched up her face in total bewilderment. Well, Ash muttered as he rubbed his head, not really knowing how to begin. Don't really know what to say, huh? Well, it's not like it's our business. When you're ready to tell us, you can, Brock told them as he crossed his arms. Right. Thank you, Brock, Ash replied with a grateful smile. I'm curious, too, but I won't press the issue. If it was something worth mentioning immediately, Molters would no doubt tell us, Lance stated. So what happens now? Serena wondered, changing the subject. Oh? With the flame? We usually present it to a chosen challenger of the Pokémon League to run it to the Indigo Plateau, Lance replied. How does someone get chosen to do this? Ash asked. They are usually pre-selected, but our chosen athlete to do it this year hasn't shown up, which had left us in a bind until now, Lance answered as he and the other Elite Four members looked thoughtfully at Ash. Until now. Ash echoed. I think we found the perfect candidate to present Molters' Flame this year to the Pokémon League, Lance said with a smile as he went over and handed the torch to Ash. You want me to do it? Ash asked in an amazed tone. Yes. It takes a special Pokémon trainer to be able to speak with Molters. It turns out your coming here was no mere coincidence. It was meant to happen, Agatha told them. I think Molters approves, as well, Lance commented as he gestured back to it. Ash looked back up to the Firebird Pokémon and saw it nod its head in confirmation. He looked back down at the torch. He couldn't believe this. He was actually being chosen by the Elite Four themselves to present the annual flame that came from Molters itself. This was almost like a dream and such an honor. Well, don't just stand there staring at it, young man. You need to hurry so you can make it in time for the opening ceremony. It can't start without the flame. This passageway will take you straight out of the cave, Agatha chuckled as she indicated to a corridor towards their right. Oh. Right. Ash exclaimed as he turned to go with everyone else, but there had been one thing that was still on his mind that he had to ask ever since meeting the Elite Four. Please. Is there any advice any of you have on what it takes to be a great Pokemon master? I feel rude asking you this, but any advice you have would be greatly appreciated. Ash pleaded. The Elite Four exchanged glances with each other and looked back down at Ash. They noticed the others and even the Pikachu was looking hopefully up at them. This was definitely a group of determined individuals in front of them. Most people only hope to battle them at first glance rather than ask for advice. It was also a rare trait in trainers. Now, my strategy is to be like the water. I go with the flow in life and become as hard as ice in battle, but a great Pokemon trainer knows how to connect with their Pokemon. It isn't just about winning a lot of badges and conquering leagues, Lorelei said. It's about finding your hidden strength on the inside, not just the outside, Bruno continued. Pokemon and their trainers should care for each other. Only then can they achieve great things together, Agatha said next. The bottom line is the bond you share your Pokemon. I think you already knew that, though, Lance said as he gave a knowing smile at Ash. Ash and Serena smiled back as they thought about what they just said. At the start of their journey, all Ash and Serena cared about was catching the strongest Pokemon they could and use great strategies to win. Now, they knew there was so much more to it than that. As they went farther, they gained so much knowledge about what being a strong trainer was really about. The Elite Four just happened to confirm what they were thinking all along. Thank you so much, Ash said. Ash, even though we just met, I feel you are going to be a great Pokemon trainer and will go far in your career. Lorelei, Bruno, Agatha, and I will be monitoring your progress in the Pokemon League. Go and do well. We believe you have what it takes to win, Lance said as he went over and placed his hands on Ash's shoulders. Ash couldn't help but redden slightly at the high amount of praise he was getting. All the Elite Four members were complimenting him, and they hadn't even known him that long. I will do my very best, Ash promised. We know, Lance responded. Ash then turned to his friends. What are you guys waiting for? Let's get this flame to the Indigo Plateau and start the ceremony. He cheered. You got it, Pokemon Master, Ash. Brock replied with a nod. We're behind you all the way. Misty agreed, too. Ash then looked at his faithful rodent partner. It sparked its cheeks, pumped both its fists into the air to show how ready it was. It was going to try its absolute best for its trainer. There was no way they were going down. Ash then saw Tajapai, who looked like it didn't quite know the situation, but he knew it would be cheering for its daddy, also. Then there was Serena, who had always been there for him. She was staring at him with a look that was a mixture of admiration and solid will. He could count on her for anything. As a team, they were unbeatable. Let's go. Ash called as he turned and ran for the exit with the torch held high. His friends were right behind him. Ash didn't know how, but he already had an amazing experience by just heading on the path to the Pokemon League. He and his friends met the Elite Four and Molders. The quartet even gave them some advice on what being a great Pokemon trainer was all about. Now Ash was more pumped than ever. With how eventful today was, he knew he was going to have an unforgettable experience ahead of him. All of his friends and Pokemon were supporting him. He was going to win and be the Pokemon League champion. Chapter 55, The Pokemon League begins. The Indigo Plateau was packed right now. Trainers from all across the region had finally come to gather for the big event starting tomorrow. Every single one of the trainers participating had fought long and difficult battles to make it this far. They were skilled enough to receive all 8 badges of the Kanto region. Some were more difficult than others, but there was no doubt they all earned the right to be here in the Pokemon League. It truly was an honor to participate. Of course, there were only around 100 participants this year. Only so many trainers were good enough to actually compete. The tourists are what made this place so lively rather than the participants themselves. Families, friends, and people who just love a good battle had come to see this once-a-year event. At the very moment, however, the Pokemon League needed one more thing before it could officially start, the Flame of Molders. Everyone was gathered side by side in a line on each side of the road. I can't wait to see the running of the torch. It's always so cool to see the flame lit just before the ceremony. Leaf said excitedly as she looked for any sign of it. I always thought it would be really awesome to be the runner for it. It makes me wonder how they get chosen, Gary added thoughtfully. They say the Elite Four chooses them, Leaf answered. I know that, but what traits do the Elite Four look for? Gary inquired. Leaf didn't know, so she just responded with a shrug. She then stuck her head out of the crowd to try to see if the runner was coming up soon. Truthfully, they should have been here by now, as it was starting to get late. They heard the announcement that the runner would be coming soon, so where was he? There it is. The Indigo Plateau. Ash hollered as he pointed in the distance with the hand that wasn't holding the torch. The group was riding Brock's Onix at the moment in order to get there faster. Now that he was in charge of running the torch, he knew everybody would be waiting for him. Evening was approaching, and Ash needed to be there before nightfall. The ride was rather rough and uncomfortable, with Onix being a large snake made of rock, but it would still get them there faster. The group could already see the large crowd of people below the hill they were on. It truly was amazing to see this many people had come to see him and others battle with everything they had. This was finally his time to shine, and he wasn't going to disappoint these people. He had Pallet Town pride on the line. Have Onix go ahead and let me off. I'm going to run the rest of the way, Ash told Brock. You got it, Ash. Brock replied it thumbs up before commanding. You heard him, Onix. Onix gave a light roar and lowered its head until it was touched the ground. Ash then carefully got off Onix's head, and as soon as he touched ground, he broke off into a sprint with Pikachu right behind him. He could hear Serena and the others cheering him on as he ran. The hill he was running down was really building up his momentum. He was so pumped. A large round of applause broke out as he drew closer. Ash couldn't help but grin broadly at the sight of this. As he neared the crowd, Ash slowed down into a jog so he could keep the torch steadier. He then broke through the first wave of people as they cheered on either side of him. Ladies and gentlemen, the Flame of Molders has finally arrived. I've just been informed by the Elite Four that the name of the torch runner this year is Ash Ketchum of Pallet Town. An older man's voice spoke over the intercom. As Ash continued to run, he happened to see Gary and Leaf in the crowd. They had their mouths dropped in complete surprise as they watched him run by. As much as Ash wanted to wave to them, it would have distracted him from his main goal. It was with that in mind that he faced forward and continued running. With the next familiar person he saw, Ash's face almost darkened a little. It was Paul, who he knew he would have an inevitable encounter with. Still, the look on the cold boy's face was priceless when he saw Ash. It was one of utter shock. As Ash neared the end of the runway, he could see a very short elderly man who he humorously thought looked a lot like Santa Claus with his huge white beard. An Officer Jenny was standing next to him and saluting Ash. The raven-haired boy didn't quite know what to think of the situation. It was pretty overwhelming. Once Ash reached them, The elderly man went over and held his hand out for Ash to shake. "Hello there, young man. My name is Charles Goodshow. I'm the president of the Pokemon League Corporation," he greeted with a smile. Ash had to admit, he was expecting the president to be very formal and well-dressed, but this man was anything but that. He was sporting a baseball cap, t-shirt, and shorts. Despite this, Ash quickly made sure to return the handshake and show his respect. "Hello, Mr. Goodshow. I'm Ash Ketchum. It's a pleasure to meet you," he replied with a bow. Now, none of that formal business. Just a simple "what's up, Mr. Goodshow" will do," Mr. Goodshow said with a laugh. Yeah, he was the complete opposite of what Ash was expecting. He didn't think he could ever bring himself to say "what's up" in front of the president of the Pokemon League. "Well, what are we just standing here for? Let's go light that flame and have ourselves a great tournament," Mr. Goodshow shouted enthusiastically. "Yes, sir," Ash agreed as they began walking towards the stadium a short distance away. The thousands of others there followed after them. Once the group entered the stadium, Ash looked around in awe at just how big it was. It could easily hold 2 Pokemon battles due to its size. Seats rose several stories high in the stands. At the very top center of the stands was an extremely large unlit torch. Ash immediately knew that was his current destination. This stadium would be hosting many types of playing fields, from grass fields, to rock fields, to even fields made entirely out of ice. Luckily, he had Pokemon that could be used for each of the environments. "So, Ash, tell me a little bit about yourself. Why did you become a Pokemon trainer?" Mr. Goodshow asked as they walked along. Ash thought a little about that question. It was innocent enough, but this was the president of the Pokemon League who asked it, so Ash wanted a good response. He briefly glanced at Pikachu beside him, and it let a smile and nodded its head for Ash to go on. "Well, I originally wanted to be a Pokemon trainer so I could be the best there ever was and get recognition," Ash began. "But after being on my journey and actually experiencing it, I realized there is so much more out there than that. My Pokemon and I are the best of friends and would do anything for each other. The best part of being a Pokemon trainer isn't winning battles. It's about raising the Pokemon you train to the best they can be. By doing that, you're able to grow with them." Mr. Goodshow seemed satisfied with that answer as he nodded his head and smiled in Ash's direction. The two, Pikachu and Officer Jenny, then made their way up the stairs which led to the torch. Once they reached it, the Pokemon League president took out a key from his pocket and unlocked a door just beneath the torch. The small group then went inside to a small circular room with various small torches in the middle. Mr. Goodshow then gestured for Ash to go ahead and light it. Ash nodded before going to light the device, and as soon as he did, there was a small flash as the flame immediately lit up. The torch next to that then lit up, followed by the one after that one, and then the next one. It wasn't long before all the torches in the circle were lit up. The flames then moved towards the center where a very large one was. The smaller flames joined together in the center and created the largest one yet. It then shot skyward, presumably towards the outside. Ash was amazed at how lighting one torch with Molter's flame could do all this. The four then exited the room where Charles Goodshow immediately locked it back up. He then pulled a microphone out and turned it on before speaking into it. The cheering crowd steadily quieted down and listened intently. The flame burned brightly above everyone. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I officially announce the start of this year's Pokemon League tournament. Let's meet all of our competitors. Please turn your attention to the screen," Mr. Goodshow announced. Everyone turned their attention to a very large screen on the opposite side of the stadium from the torch. An image of each person began appearing on the screen in twos with their names next to him. After a short bit, Ash saw Gary's name appear and smiled for his friend. Right after Gary he saw Paul, and kept a stony expression. After a few more slides he saw his face and name appear next to an older boy who had long green hair. Ash believed that he had seen everyone he knew in the tournament, but he was soon proven wrong. On one of the last few slides, Ash saw someone whom he hadn't seen in many months, and honestly, he was very pleased. It was the boy whom they had met in Celadon City during the power plant crisis, Richie Hiroshi. Richie. Ash thought excitedly. It all suddenly came back to him. Richie had turned out to be a very friendly boy who immediately hit it off with Ash. The two became good friends in such a short amount of time and promised to meet each other again at the Pokemon League. It looks like that promise was kept, after all. Ash hoped he would be able to see Richie soon and catch up. Once all of the slides had been shown, Charles Goodshow spoke into the microphone again. I hope all of you trainers paid close attention to who you appeared with on the screen, as that will be your first opponent. Make sure to check with the nearest Nurse Joy at one of our many Pokemon centers so you may know when your first match is scheduled. With that, I want all of the participating trainers to follow me over to the festival hall for the ceremony banquet. I'm starving. He finished the last part with a laugh. The large group of people nodded and began filing out of the stadium. The trainers headed one way while the guests went another to their own business. Ash followed the Pokemon League president not because he felt the need to still be around, but it was because he honestly had no idea where the festival hall was. The Indigo Plateau was like a maze. By the time Ash and Pikachu reached the festival hall, there was already a line of trainers standing outside of the building. It may take a while to get through there. Ash and Pikachu both groaned as they felt their stomachs growl. He kind of wished he would get to eat supper with Serena and his friends, and he would probably get his food faster that way, too. He knew this was a tradition, though. Hopefully, he would be able to find Gary and they could share a table. Hi there, Ash. Ash's face broke into a wide grin before he even turned around. Despite not hearing it in a while, Ash immediately knew who it was. Turning around confirmed it was none other than Richie Hiroshi. He hadn't changed a bit since Ash last saw him. Like Ash's Pikachu, Richie's Pikachu was riding his shoulder, too. Hey, Richie! Ash exclaimed as the two immediately shook hands before pulling each other into a brotherly hug. The two Pikachu hopped off their trainers' shoulders and before greeting the other by shaking their tails like a handshake. So I see you made it? Ash smiled as he and Richie broke their hug. Yeah. I've got all my badges right here. Richie replied as he showed Ash the inside of the jacket where his 8 badges were pinned. Awesome, and here are mine. Ash said as he likewise showed Richie the inside of his jacket. That's really great, Ash. Richie replied before adding, so tell me. What all have you been up to since I saw you last? Ha 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 ha. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Ash laughed as he rubbed the back of his head. It was more like what Ash hadn't been up to since last seeing Richie. He had stopped Team Rocket from taking over the Sylph Company. He saved Cinnabar Island from being terrorized by an enraged Aerodactyl. He saved a cold, emotionless girl from herself. He had a hand in shutting down the Team Rocket organization and saved his mother in the process. He stopped Mewtwo from destroying the world. Yeah. It was way too much to count. As soon as Ash was inside the festival hall, his mouth immediately watered. There was a long table filled with all sorts of food on top. As Ash looked around, it appeared that many trainers here had almost as big an appetite as he did. Their plates were piled high, and they were really chowing down. It took a while of looking, but Ash eventually found Gary. sitting at a table with one other person. This person in particular was a young man with frizzy black hair and had a plate full of food. It seemed he decided to sample everything. It was then something quite unusual captured his attention about the man. He had a Meowth next to him, but it was wearing boots, a scarf, and a hat. That's interesting, Ash muttered more to himself than Richie or Pikachu. Richie must have seen what he was talking about as he nodded his head. Yeah. That Meowth is really different from most Meowths I've seen. It looks really, well, relaxed, he trailed, not knowing the best way to describe it. Sure enough, the Meowth in question was sitting cross-legged with one paw behind its head while the other was used for grabbing one piece of fruit after another. Seconds later, the fruit would disappear into the Meowth's mouth, usually in one bite. Ash quickly turned away from the scene so he wouldn't be caught staring. It would be rather awkward if he was caught. He then focused his attention back to table of food now that he had reached it and immediately grabbed a plate. He was filling it with all different sorts of food. He wanted to sample everything they had to offer but didn't think he would have enough room on his plate. He may have to go back for seconds. Richie was a lot more modest with his plate and only got things that he seemed he would really like. Pika Pie? Pikachu asked hopefully at Ash. Don't worry, buddy. I haven't forgotten about your ketchup. There's some right over there, Ash replied as he pointed to the condiment station. So your Pikachu likes ketchup, too? Richie asked in an amused tone. Pikachu. Pikachu answered instead with a smile. Sparky here can't get enough of it, either. Richie laughed as he gestured to his own Pikachu. Pika-a-a-a-a, Sparky said dreamily as it thought of the sloppy tomato goodness. Once both trainers got their fill, they headed over to the condiment table and got an excess amount of ketchup for their Pikachu. Then they tried to look for a table that was quite empty, but all the other tables almost seemed full. Ash noticed there was plenty of open seats at the table Paul was sitting at as he was by himself. That wasn't surprising. Of course, Ash wasn't going to sit with Paul. He then noticed that the table Gary was sitting at still only had him and man with the Meowth. With a shrug, the two headed over. Hey, Gary. Ash greeted as he and Richie sat down while the two Pikachu scooped up a glob of ketchup with their tiny spoons. They then clinked the spoons together and proceeded to slurp it up. Yo, Ash. Gary replied before jumping straight to the point. I can't help but ask, how the heck did you get chosen to run the Flame of Molders? The young man with the Meowth also looked up from his food and gave a curious eye at Ash. Richie appeared slightly uncomfortable, but it was clear he was wondering, too. Ash knew he would probably be asked sooner or later, so he might as well do it now. He had to make sure to leave out certain details, though. He promised the Elite Four he wouldn't tell them about Molders. Well, I was going through Victory Road with Serena, Brock, and Misty. I happened to bump into the Elite Four there, Ash started. The Elite Four were there? Leaf and I didn't see them when we went through, Gary commented. We were in a part of the cave that not many people go to, Ash answered before continuing. Anyway, they told me I had come at a great time because the person chosen for the running never showed up. Since I was a challenger, they asked if I would do it. That's really all there was to it? Gary asked skeptically. Yeah, Ash answered lamely before taking a bite of food and swallowing, trying to look as casual as possible. Gary gave Ash a hard stare. The raven-haired boy knew Gary was searching his eyes or body movements to determine if he was hiding something. Ash had a feeling Gary knew. He wasn't telling him the full truth. Thankfully, the teenager with the frizzy black hair came to the rescue. It's okay. I get the feeling that there are some things you aren't allowed to say. I can respect that, he said. Thanks, Ash smiled as he looked towards the teen. By the way, I don't think I've introduced myself yet. My name's Ash Ketchum, and that's my partner, Pikachu. I'm Richie Hiroshi, and that's Sparky. Richie added. I got ya. Well, my name's Tyson, and that's my Meowth. Tyson answered while gesturing to the Meowth. The Meowth tipped its hat to Ash and Richie in response. That's a really different Meowth from the ones I'm used to seeing, Ash commented. To be fair, though, he only really got to know Team Rocket's Meowth, and it wasn't exactly the best example. Yeah. This Meowth has been my partner for a really long time. It actually is strong enough to evolve into a Persian, but it refuses to, Tyson replied. My Pikachu feels the same way. I once gave it the option to evolve, but my buddy is happy just the way it is. I wouldn't have it any other way. Ash said as he smiled down at his rodent partner. Pika-Pie. Pikachu agreed before going back to its ketchup. My Sparky feels the same way. I couldn't imagine what it would be like if it was a Raichu, Richie added. None of my Pokemon have ever really objected to evolving. I guess there are some who don't like change, Gary said thoughtfully. I don't think it's like that, Tyson rebutted. My Meowth believes it can only reach its best potential without evolving. If it evolves, it feels all the power it gained as a Meowth will be for nothing. It wants to prove its strength by beating opponents much stronger than it is without having to evolve. Meow, Tyson's Meowth agreed. It had a much lower tone than other Meowth. So Richie, was it? How did you meet Ash? Gary questioned. We met in Celadon City, Richie answered. I was investigating the water pollution situation there and ended up being captured by Team Rocket. I wouldn't have made it if it wasn't for Ash and his other friends coming along. I remember hearing about that, Tyson jumped in. So you guys are the ones who helped put a stop to it? That's pretty awesome. Meow, Tyson's Meowth agreed again. Excuse me, are you by chance Ash Ketchum? Came an unfamiliar voice behind Ash. It had a foreign accent. Ash spun around and saw it was the young man with long green hair who he was paired with. He would apparently be his first opponent in the Pokemon League. He wore flashy pink clothing with a headband holding his long green hair back. He had a conceited look on his face, not too much different from how Gary's used to be a while back. I am. It looks like we'll be against each other in the first round. What's your name? Ash asked in a friendly tone. My name is Mandy the Astounding, the boy responded arrogantly and flipped his hair. Well, it's nice to meet you, Mandy, Ash said as he held out his hand for the boy to shake. Humph. Hands are for holding pokeballs, not handshaking, the boy replied snootily as he brought out a pokeball and spun it on his index finger for emphasis. Okay then, Ash said, trying to remain friendly. I didn't come over to make friends with you. I just wanted to let you know that you don't have a chance against me. I will allow you the chance to give up now so you don't have to suffer a loss, Mandy smirked. Now wait just a minute here. My pal Ash is just as good a trainer as anyone. He'll never back out of a challenge, Gary defended. Heh. I'm afraid that being just as good as any trainer as any won't be enough to beat Mandy the Astounding, Mandy replied. There's no way I'm backing down. I'm going to fight tomorrow's battle with everything I have. Ash said a little loudly, causing a few trainers at nearby tables to look at him. We shall see. Won't we? Mandy responded before walking off to where he was sitting. I'd just ignore him if I were you, Ash, Richie told him. Trainers like that are usually all bark and no bite. I don't know, Ash muttered. Every trainer is here because they deserve it. Beating the gym leaders is no cakewalk. I had some really close calls with a few of them. The best thing you can do is just make sure you win against him. Gary said before adding. Show him some of that Pallet Town pride. You bet, Gary. Ash replied as they fist-bumped. The trainers' banquet had gone on for about another hour before the crowd finally began to disperse. Ash, Richie, Gary, and Tyson had been one of the last groups to leave, because they were too busy talking. It turned out Tyson was a pretty cool guy who had a lot in common with Ash and others. He had come from the Hone region. Ash and Tyson wished each other the best of luck before going their separate ways outside the banquet, with Pikachu and Sparky shaking the Meowth's paw. Gary, Richie, and Ash then decided it would be best to go find the others. They needed to find a room in one of the Pokemon centers. While the centers were big and there were many, there was also many tourists who would be taking up space. Having a nice bed and room was something the three needed to be able to perform their best in the coming battles. "Do you have a Pokemon Center to stay at yet, Richie?" Ash asked him. "Well, no. I went over here as soon as Mr. Goodshow made the announcement, so I never had a chance," Richie admitted. "If that's the case, you should come with Gary and me. It'll be a blast," Ash encouraged. "Well, a friend of Ash is a friend of mine, so it's fine with me, too," Gary added. "Wow. I might actually take you up on that." "Thanks guys," Richie exclaimed. "Pikachu." The two Pikachu cheered at being able to spend more time with each other. The three were just about to set off when Ash's poke gear rung. He looked and smiled when he saw it was Serena calling him. It was likely she was starting to worry since he had been out so late. He hadn't spent any time with her since he had been here, so it's only natural she would wonder what he's doing. "Hey, Serena," Ash greeted as soon as he answered the poke gear. "Ash. Where are you? The others and I are starting to worry," Serena exclaimed. "Ha ha ha ha. Sorry about that. I just got caught up talking to Gary, Richie, and a new friend named Tyson. We kind of lost track of time. We're on our way back right now." Ash laughed. "Well, we're in Pokemon Center B, so I'll see you when you get back. We already got you a room, so you don't need to worry," Serena told him. "Thanks, Serena. You're the best. I can always count on you to take care of me." Ash smiled. He heard Serena giggle on the other end. "Of course you can. I'll see you in a bit." "All right. Bye, Serena," Ash closed as he turned the phone off. "Heh. Serena's already worried about you like some married woman," Gary chuckled. Ash rolled his eyes at that comment and took a good look at where they were at. The Pokemon centers were lined up in a row and conveniently marked A, B, C, and so on. They were by Pokemon Center G right now, and Serena said she and the others were in B. Ash squinted his eyes and could see the large letter off in the distance. It wasn't too far of a walk. After a short time, the group of three reached the designated Pokemon Center and entered. As expected, the place was chock full of trainers. Despite there being so many different Pokemon centers, it seemed everybody wouldn't be getting a room and resorted to sleeping in the lobby in sleeping bags. Ash, Gary, and Richie felt extremely grateful that their friends had already reserved a room for them. "Hey." The group turned in the direction of voice and saw Serena, Leaf, Misty, and Brock coming towards them. Serena was first, and she didn't waste any time giving Ash a big hug, which he returned. She hadn't seen him since he sprinted off Brock's Onix. Even though it was only hours, it felt even longer to her. She felt inseparable from Ash. Call her clingy, but whatever. It wasn't easy, but the group finally found a space that didn't have a plethora of other people around it and used that to catch up. The group spent that time with Ash, reintroducing the group to Richie, talking about their journey, or just about anything. Ash was having the time of his life right now. It had really been quite a while since he and all his friends were gathered for just a fun time. While they had been in Pallet, they were busy doing other things like training or watching Serena conquer the battle chateau, or they were never all together at once. Now they finally were, and they even had Richie joining them. Time really flew by for the group, and it wasn't long before it was already time for bed. During this time, Ash had learned his time for his first match was going to be at 11 in the morning. It turned out for the better, as he would have plenty of time to eat and train. The rooms were large enough for 4 people each, so Ash, Brock, Gary, and Richie would be in one room while Serena, Misty, and Leaf shared another room. Ash was now getting ready for bed. He climbed into his bed and gave a contented sigh. Here he was. Tomorrow was going to be his very first match in the Pokemon League. He wasn't exactly going to be battling with the nicest person in the world, but it didn't matter. Ash was determined to push though and win, no matter who he was facing. So Ash, how do you feel about your match tomorrow? Richie asked as he climbed into the bunk underneath Ash. Well, Ash began but yawned before continuing. I don't know much about what kind of Pokemon this Mandy person has, but I have a good selection of Pokemon for the water field tomorrow. I'm going to be using Krabby, Wartortle, and Aerodactyl. Are you sure that's a good idea to use a Krabby and Aerodactyl in the Pokemon League, Ash? From what I know, Krabby's only battled a couple of times and Aerodactyl hasn't had a real battle at all, Gary pointed out from his bunk on the other side of the room. My Pokemon have overcome the odds more often than not. I still remember how well Krabby did in Celadon City Gym despite having a type disadvantage. Wartortle had gone up against Pokemon much stronger than it in Blaine's gym, even though it was outclassed, Ash recalled. An Aerodactyl. Gary pushed again. I don't know how to explain it, but I really feel like Aerodactyl can do it. Call it intuition, but I just feel like Aerodactyl is going to have a very memorable battle, Ash answered. That sounds really risky, Brock commented. I have to believe in the strength of my Pokemon and take risks sometimes. It's the only way I'm going to be the best Pokemon master in the world, Ash stated. Pika-Pie. Pikachu agreed. I don't think it'll ever happen, Richie said from below Ash before adding, because I'm going to be the best trainer in the entire galaxy. That's not even close to me. Gary smirked. I'll be the best in the entire universe. Pokemon Masters. That's us. Ash declared from his bunk, earning a laugh from the others. I guess that leaves me okay to be the greatest Pokemon breeder, seeing as I have no competition, Brock smirked. He was met by 2 pillows to the face from Ash and Gary. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be starting our match on the water field in 5 minutes. The announcer called over the stadium. Ash was heading towards the stadium with all the others. They had just left Gary's battle, which he had won. Of course, Gary jokes about being the greatest ever, so the others let him have his moment to shine a little bit. Gary's Arcanine had really pulled through against the other trainers' Hypno. It really was one of his most trusted and strongest Pokemon. After Blast was. As they made their way there, they spotted Mandy giving an interview to reporters. He was greatly exaggerating his movements through hair flips and poses. The group rolled their eyes. What an ego. Once he reached the spot where the challengers were supposed to go, he bid his friends farewell, where they wished him good luck before heading off. Serena, of course, had a few other things to say. How are you feeling, Ash? She asked him. I'm feeling really good. I know you'll be up there cheering me on. That's enough to keep me going until the end, Ash replied. Hee hee. You're so silly, Ash. Serena giggled. Well, I'm still new to this relationship stuff, so I still may say stupid things every now and then. Ash joked. I know, but that's what I love about you. Good luck. You'll do great. Serena said as she gave him a hug. Thanks, Ash replied as he returned it. I'll be listening for you because I know you'll be cheering the loudest out of everyone. Always. Serena answered before hurrying to catch up with the others. Ash stared at Serena as she hurried off. Sometimes, it was just hard to take his eyes off her. Her hair was swaying back and forth against the wind. Her. Pika. Pikachu yelled, snapping him out of it. Oh, right. The match. Ash remembered as he hurried through the trainer entrance. As he was running through, he bumped into Tyson. Tyson? Ash questioned as he looked up at the teenager in confusion. Sorry about that, Ash. My Meowth and I were just leaving here. We had the water field last and I was drying Meowth off. If there's one thing it can't stand, it's the water. We still won, though. Tyson laughed. Oh, congratulations. Ash praised as he looked down at Tyson's Meowth, who looked a little annoyed at having to battle in the water field. Meow meow, it muttered. Don't look at me like that, Tyson said with a smile. You were the one who decided to battle on the water field. Meow meow, it said. That's why I agreed to it. You're strong enough to win on any environment, Tyson said. The Meowth in boots just sighed in response. Anyway, I think you're up next, so I just wanted to wish you the best of luck. Tyson continued. Thanks, Tyson. Ash smiled as the two shook hands. Tyson then hurried out of tunnel with his Meowth close behind. Ash watched the two with a smile on his face. He couldn't help but be reminded how similar those two were to him. And Pikachu? They would quibble over the silliest of things but were still inseparable. Ash then nodded his head and proceeded out to the stadium. As he entered, he saw the field definitely lived up to its name. There were 2 trainers' boxes on each side of the field and an Olympic-sized swimming pool of water in the center. With only a few small platforms in random areas of the pool. Krabby, Wartortle would thrive here while Aerodactyl could battle over the water. Ladies and gentlemen, our other challenger, Ash Ketchum of Pallet Town, has now arrived. The other participant today will be Mandy the Astounding, one of the most popular Pokemon trainers in the area. Good luck to both trainers. The announce stated. Mandy the Astounding doesn't need luck, Mandy smirked. He then made a bouquet of flowers appear from seemingly nowhere and tossed it into the crowd. The crowd immediately began fighting over the bouquet until a teenage girl finally hung onto it. We love you, Mandy. A large portion of the crowd roared. Ash sighed after he heard that. He was no doubt the underdog here. It was more than likely that Mandy had gathered quite a following on his Pokemon journey through his flashy clothes and magic tricks. Ash, on the other hand, only saved the world from Team Rocket, but most people don't care about things like that nowadays, not that Ash was open about it anyway. In the end, it didn't matter how many people rooted for him. He would always have his friends and Serena supporting him, and that was enough. May both trainers enter their designated box, please? The announcer requested. Ash entered his box with Pikachu by his side. He had a determined look on his face while Mandy wore an arrogant smirk and crossed his arms. He didn't even look the least bit worried about this match. So he thought Ash would be an easy victory, did he? Ash didn't know what kind of trainers Mandy faced in the past before coming here, but he was about to prove he wasn't just some stepping stone on Mandy's supposed path to greatness. He was determined to win. Okay. I need each trainer to choose their Pokemon. We will now cast a roulette to decide who goes first. The judge declared. Everyone looked up on the large screen where Ash and Mandy's image appeared. Their sides on the screen then began flashing back and forth at a quick speed. After a few seconds, it slowed down before finally settling on Mandy's image. Okay, Mandy. Please choose your first Pokemon. The judge commanded. My first Pokemon is all I will need, Mandy smirked as he held up a pokeball with his two front fingers. He then skillfully tossed the pokeball in the air before yelling, "Go!" Executor. A large Pokemon that resembled a coconut tree with two legs and no arms appeared on one of the platforms and let out a cry. It then shook its many heads and a brilliant powder appeared above it, causing the crowd to go wild again. This Executor appeared to be quite a show-off like its trainer. A grass type, Ash said to himself before looking at Pikachu. What do you think, Pikachu? Can Krabby handle another grass type? Pikachu. It responded with nod. My thoughts exactly. Ash smiled as he threw the ball forward. Let's go, Krabby. The river crab Pokemon appeared and clicked its pincers to get itself pumped up for the battle. This was its first real Pokemon battle since the Celadon Gym, but Ash had trained with it since coming home, so it felt prepared for anything once again. What? There's no way a Krabby can beat an Executor! Gary exclaimed from the crowd. Ash doesn't exactly have a normal Krabby, Brock smiled as he watched. That's right. Ash learned very quickly that he and Krabby have good strategies for dealing with grass types, Serena added. Executor's a part psychic type, too, Leaf countered. I didn't say it was the best choice, but I still think Krabby might be able to win if Ash plays it really smart, Brock replied. Your Krabby is no match for my Executor. This match will be easier than I thought, Mandy said. We're going to prove you wrong. Isn't that right, Krabby? Ash asked it. Koki. It cried in response. All right. The 3-on-3 battle between Mandy and Ash will begin as soon as I lower my flag. Are the trainers ready? The judge asked as he raised his flags. Ash nodded, and so did Mandy. They stood at the ready. They were ready to issue a command as soon as they were able to. Ash narrowed his eyes. This was the Pokemon League. There was no time for rookie mistakes here. He had to battle with everything he had and use his best strategies. Ash took a deep breath to steady himself, and then begin. The judge declared as he brought his flags down. Executor, use Leech Seed, Mandy commanded. I figured he would start the match off with a move like that, but Krabby and I have practiced for things like this, Ash thought. Exige. The coconut Pokemon cried as it bent over and shot a rather large seed towards Krabby, but it and Ash knew what to do. Krabby. Use your crab hammer on that leech seed back to Executor. Ash yelled. Krabby reeled its pincer back as it glowed. It then swung its right pincer as hard as it could, knocking back the leech seed and sending it flying towards Executor. Not too bad. Executor, use confusion. Mandy called. Executor's eyes glowed and stopped the leech seed just before it struck. The leech seed hovered in the air for a moment before going back to Krabby. This time it was going in all sorts of angles so Krabby couldn't get a clear shot at it. Krabby swiped at the seed again only for the leech seed to dance out of the way and go for it again. Krabby was doing a good job of keeping the seed at bay, but Ash knew it couldn't do that forever. Apparently, Mandy was tired of this, so he decided to kick it up a notch. Executor, use Stun Spore, he said. The Executor was clearly able to do 2 attacks at once as it began shaking the leaves on its head very quickly while still using confusion. The brown powder sprinkled out of its head as it headed towards Krabby. Krabby's eyes widened as it saw the Stun Spore coming closer. There was no way it could dodge both Stun Spore and the Leech Seed. Okay. That Executor is pretty good, Ash thought. I've got it. Krabby, use Protect and dive in the water to avoid Stun Spore. Krabby nodded its head and a glowing barrier appeared around it. The Leech Seed bounced harmlessly off the barrier and fell to the ground, completely powerless. Krabby then managed to hop into the pool just before the Stun Spore reached it. The brown powder then landed in the pool before dissolving. Your Krabby is not safe in the water, either, Mandy smirked. Use confusion, Executor. Executor's eyes glowed blue once again, and the water began to get extremely choppy. It wasn't long before a whirlpool was formed. It started off small, but quickly grew in size. Despite its best efforts to stay away from the whirlpool, Krabby was soon sucked into it and began spinning around inside. Hold on, Krabby! Ash called. Mandy, meanwhile, was simply standing there with his arms folded, wearing a confident smirk on his face. Krabby began swimming frantically through the whirlpool in an effort to stay afloat, but the pull was too strong. It started to use its pincers like paddles for extra power, but even that strategy proved fruitless. It was nothing but a sitting duck in that whirlpool. I hate to say it, but that Executor is really well trained, Richie muttered from the crowd. We met him last night at the trainer's banquet. He was kind of a jerk and even told Ash to just give up before facing him. I was kind of hoping he was a horrible trainer with an attitude like that who just pretended he was good, Gary continued. He was able to back it up, after all, Misty mumbled. Let's go, Ash! Leaf and Serena screamed from the stands. It was little hard for them to stand out, however, because the majority of the crowd was cheering for Mandy. Use egg bomb while Krabby is trapped, Executor, Mandy told it. Executor once more bent over before shooting large, egg-shaped, orbs from its head. Ash knew Krabby couldn't grab or knock these back even if it wasn't trapped. They would explode on impact regardless. The egg bombs were splashing all over the pool while Executor was still using confusion. It wouldn't be too long before Executor got a lucky shot. Krabby, meanwhile, was becoming extremely dizzy due to all the swirling. Try as it might, it just wasn't strong enough to break free of the whirlpool. Ash had trained with it a lot in the water while he was in Pallet Town, but neither of them were ever expecting it to be trapped in a whirlpool. It began struggling harder, but the current still did what it wanted to with Krabby. It would need help in getting out of that whirlpool. Ash gritted his teeth as he thought of returning Krabby so it wouldn't get knocked out so soon. Even so, there had to be something to get it out of that whirlpool. He then cast a glance at Executor as it continued to launch several egg bombs in the pool. Every time they hit, a large splash would occur. Krabby was doing its best to dodge despite spinning around but was clearly getting tired. If one of those egg bombs hit, it would probably all be over. Still, they made small spouts of water when they hit the whirlpool. That's it? Ash thought. Okay, Krabby. I'm going to ask you to do something a little difficult, but I believe in you. I need you to try to track where the egg bombs are going to land. When you do, I need you to get beneath the water. Will you do that? Ash asked it. He saw a slight movement from Krabby's pincer indicating it understood what he said. Everyone in the stands seemed rather confused by this course of action. Wouldn't that cause a lot of damage to Krabby? I think we're about to see another strategy only Ash can think of, Brock smiled. And Ash Ketchum of Pallet Town sends a strange request to his Pokemon. What could he possibly be planning? Meanwhile, Mandy appears to be in complete control of the situation. The announcer shouted. Krabby looked at all of the glowing orbs coming towards it. There appeared to be no specific pattern, so it would need to wait for a lucky one. Whenever it was, Krabby hoped it was soon, because it couldn't be in this whirlpool much longer unless its strength ran out, or it passed out from dizziness. It then spotted what looked like an egg bomb coming straight for it. Krabby needed to be quick. It submerged its whole body beneath the whirlpool and immediately felt 10 times dizzier than it felt already. Luckily, the egg bomb hit soon after. It didn't quite know what to expect, but the attack didn't hurt near as much as it thought it would. The water probably quickly defused it. Despite this, a large amount of pressure erupted right underneath Krabby from the force of the underwater explosion. It was blasted out of the whirlpool at a diagonal angle on a collision course with Executor, taking it completely by surprise. Krabby didn't stop there, however. It began glowing white while everyone in the stadium gasped. Its pincers grew larger with a noticeably bigger one and a crown formed on its head. When it stopped glowing, a kingler was in its place, and it was still sailing straight towards Executor. All this happened in a span of less than 3 seconds. Ash wanted to celebrate, but knew he didn't have time to. "Kingler, Crabhammer!" he yelled. Kingler managed to get its largest claw to glow just before ramming into the dumbfounded Executor. The pincer and Kingler itself collided into Executor with the force of a truck, and the coconut Pokemon was sent toppling backwards and into the water before sinking like a stone. The whirlpool slowly halted now that Executor had lost control. "This is impossible!" Mandy exclaimed. Kingler landed on the platform Executor was on and clicked its pincers to show it was still ready to fight. It turned back and nodded to Ash, which the raven-haired boy returned with a thumbs up. The crowd erupted into applause and happy cheers from seeing an evolution right on the battlefield. "And what did I tell you?" Brock smirked from the crowd. "Ash Ketchum and his crazy but brilliant strategies," Misty muttered. "Now that Krabby's a kingler, I bet it can kick that Executor's butt," Leaf exclaimed as she pumped her fist into the air. "Someone's really getting into the battle," Gary smirked from the side. "Well, of course. I was doing the same for your battle, too, you know," Leaf exclaimed. Gary's cheeks tinged pink as he didn't know how to respond to that. He simply faced forward so nobody would notice what his stupid face had decided to do in front of everyone. "Darn it, Leaf." Serena had her hands clasped as she let out a smile. Ash was always the best with overcoming the odds. She had such an amazing battler for a boyfriend. If he won this first Indigo League battle, she would be so proud of him. Serena blushed at the thought of what she might do but quickly shook those thoughts from her head to focus on the match. "That was great, Kingler. You rule. What do say we win this battle?" Ash exclaimed. "Kokei!" It responded happily. "Gur, how dare this boy steal the crowd cheers from me," Mandy uttered. "I will need to teach him and that Kingler a lesson." Executor, psychic attack. Much to the surprise of Ash and Kingler, a burst of psychic waves blasted out of the water and struck Kingler dead on. How on earth had a Pokemon like Executor used a psychic attack, or any attack, underwater like that? Kingler was blasted back several feet and back into the water. "Now use confusion to give yourself an opening underwater," Mandy ordered next. There was a glowing pair of dots from inside the water which were undoubtedly Executor's eyes. The pool once more began to slosh around, but instead of creating a whirlpool, this time, it began to part to the side. The water continued to part until dry ground at the bottom revealed itself. Since Executor would be unable to get back onto the platform, it would have to resort to this to fight. On the other end was Kingler with a wall of water on each side of them. It was like the parting of the Red Sea in the pool. Everyone couldn't help but be slightly impressed at the Executor. Most Pokemon of this type would be unable to battle once in the pool, but not this one. Mandy really trained this one well. It was quite powerful. "Use psychic attack once more, Executor," Mandy smiled. The coconut Pokemon once again amazed everyone by blasting the psychic waves while still controlling the water. There wasn't much room on dry ground, so Ash decided have Kingler dodge in the water. "Quick, Kingler! Jump into the wall of water to hide!" Ash shouted. Kingler nodded its head and proceeded to jump towards the wall of water, only to crash into it and fall to the ground. The psychic attack then struck Kingler again, sending it flying through the air before hitting the ground in a sprawled position. "What?" Ash exclaimed. Heh. Don't you think Mandy the Astounding knows that you were planning on having Kingler hide in the water? I had my executor use its confusion to make the wall of water as hard as rock so nothing can get through it, Mandy smirked. Ash gritted his teeth as there were little options right now. The passageway between the wall of water was quite narrow and unfit for dodging. It seemed like it would be more of a test of endurance. The only problem was Executor knew all kinds of long-range attacks while most of Kingler's attacks were close-range. We shall win this with a leaf storm, Mandy smiled. Executor soon whipped up a massive flurry of leaves and sent them sailing straight towards Kingler. The pincer Pokemon had been in these situations before, but only with razor leaf attacks. A leaf storm would be much harder. Kingler braced itself and prepared to do the quickest cutting it had ever done in its life so far. You can do it, Kingler. Ash cheered on. Kingler took a deep breath and began cutting up as many leaves as it could. Because its pincers were so much larger, it was able to crunch many at a time. There were still leaves that managed to get through. Kingler grimaced in pain with each leaf that stuck. The attack finally ceased and Kingler was panting heavily. It managed to keep damage to a minimum with its pincers, but the attack was still super effective, and Kingler was wearing out fast. That Kingler is quick with its claws. We should slow it down with a stun spore. It has no place to hide now, Mandy said. The executor uttered its name again before shaking its leaves violently, causing the brown powder to come out once more. It began to move towards Kingler as Ash tried to think of what to do. Okay, Ash. Try to think back to the time when Kingler was facing Tangela. It was paralyzed by stun spore, but it managed to heal itself by washing it off with water pulse. Will that work before it hits? It did dissolve in the pool, Ash mused to himself. Seeing no other option, Ash took a gamble. He had to be fast again. Use water pulse, Kingler. He yelled. Kingler unleashed a small orb of water from its mouth and shot it towards the stun spore. The part of brown powder hit by the water instantly dissolved, creating a pathway for Kingler. Ash knew that Kingler couldn't just stand there, so he had to act. All right, Kingler. Let's go on the offensive. Charge towards Executor. Ash yelled. Koki. Kingler cried as it charged towards Executor as fast as its crab legs would carry it. Foolish boy. My Executor's attacks will wear it out before Kingler reaches it. Use egg bomb, Mandy said. Executor bent over and began launching several more egg-shaped bombs at Kingler, but Ash and Kingler were ready this time. Use bubble to detonate those egg bombs. Ash hollered. Kingler obeyed and shot a large amount of bubbles from its larger pincer. The bubbles struck each of the egg bombs that were launched, detonating them before they even came close to Kingler. Still, the pincer Pokemon continued charging towards Executor. Use Psychic. Mandy cried. Leap over it, Kingler. Ash commanded. Kingler skillfully jumped as the psychic waves soared underneath it. By now it had reached Executor, and Ash issued his next command. Use Crab Hammer and send it flying. Ash called. Kingler slammed its large pincer right into Executor's many faces. The coconut Pokemon yelled in pain as Ash issued his next command. Grab onto it, and Crab Hammer it into the air, Kingler. Ash yelled. Kingler opened both its pincers and clamped onto Executor before lifting the heavy Pokemon right off the ground and over its head. The crowd let out a surprised gasp at how strong Kingler was proving to be. It then hurled Executor into the air before leaping after it. Executor had lost its focus so much from being thrown that the wall of water instantly crashed back to its original position, leaving nothing but a raging pool. Hyper Beam. Ash hollered. Leaf Storm. Mandy attempted to counter. Executor shook itself of its stun as Kingler opened up its largest pincer. High-powered energy began building up inside the pincer. The coconut Pokemon released the Leaf Storm. Just as Kingler shot the Hyper Beam. Despite the high-powered flurry of leaves, they were no match for the Hyper Beam. The high-powered beam blasted right through the Leaf Storm, completely incinerating any leaves and not leaving a trace. The beam then kept going before slamming right into the airborne Executor. The Executor was blasted backwards by the beam back towards the water, and the attack didn't relent until Executor made contact with platform below it, causing an explosion. Kingler then fell back towards the ground and landed in the water with a resounding splash. It was panting heavily from using so many attacks in succession and still hurting from the damage, but it was otherwise okay. Everyone waited in anticipation to see if the powerful Executor would get up, but as the smoke cleared, Executor was on its back clearly knocked out. Executor is unable to battle. The winner is Kingler. The judge declared. Unbelievable, folks. Kingler had a really rocky start, but it evolved and really overcame the odds. Newcomer Ash Ketchum really knew what he was doing. The judge announced as. The crowd erupted into applause. Woohoo! Go Ash! Leaf screamed. Serena breathed a huge sigh of relief. She didn't know what it was with Krabby, no, Kingler's knack for winning against grass types, but it proved that any Pokemon could win against any with the right strategy. She smiled down at Ash and could have sworn he looked into the stands and somehow managed to find her and make eye contact with her, but one could easily say he is looking up at the cheering crowd in general. Ash had indeed managed to see Serena in the crowd. Call it intuition, but he somehow knew exactly where Serena was in that whole crowd and could see her smiling at him. He didn't know if she knew he could see her, though. He then turned back to Kingler before smiling broadly at it. That was amazing, Kingler, and congratulations on evolving. He told it. Pika-Pi. Pikachu added. Kokae, it responded happily before grimacing in the pain it was in. Ash nodded his head and felt this was a good time to recall Kingler. He could let it rest in its Pokeball and that way use it for later if he needed to. Return, Kingler. He yelled before withdrawing it to the Pokeball and smiling at it. Mandy, meanwhile, returned Executor and didn't look the least bit worried. In fact, he was smirking. The kid had some beginner's luck, but his luck is about to run out. Seadra, go. He said and released the Pokemon. A blue Pokemon that looked somewhat like a cross between a seahorse and a dragon with a large hole in its snout appeared. It landed in the now calming waters with a splash and looked ready to fight. A Seadra, Ash muttered as he and Serena scanned it. Seadra, the dragon Pokemon and the evolved form of Horsa. Its body bristles with sharp spikes and touching them can cause the victim to be poisoned, the Pokédexes stated. Seadra is probably pretty quick in the water, so I'll need one, too, Ash said to himself before making his decision. Wartortle, I choose you. The evolved form of Squirtle appeared with a cry and likewise landed in the pool and locked eyes with its opponent. The two Pokemon stared back and forth at each other, ready for the judge to wave his flag down. Okay, Wartortle versus Seadra. Begin. The judge shouted. Seadra, agility, Mandy called. Skull Bash. Ash hollered. Before Wartortle could even react, Seadra broke into breakneck speed in the water and crashed into Wartortle. The turtle Pokemon was sent flying out of the water and onto one of the platforms before slowly getting and shaking its head at how fast that thing was. Your Wartortle is too slow for my speedy Seadra, Mandy smirked. Now, obstruct their view with smoke screen. Seadra immediately blew forth a black smoke from its snout right at Wartortle. It began coughing violently at the smoke, and once again it was hit with an attack before it even saw it coming. Seadra had leaped out of the water and collided with it once more, sending it into the water. That, however, gave Ash an idea. Dive underwater, Warderdle. Cedra's smoke screen won't work there, he called. Warderdle nodded its head and soon dove underwater, but that didn't stop Mandy. He immediately told Cedra to go underwater after it, which the dragon Pokemon did. The two Pokemon were then nothing more than shadows moving through the water at high speed. Ash grimaced as he saw what looked like Warderdle get attacked again in the water. It was true that Warderdle was fast there, but Cedra was still faster. Cedra, use Twister. Mandy hollered. Hang on, Warderdle. Ash called. Try to get away from it. It was no use, though. The water once again began swirling around, and it wasn't long before what looked like a water spout emerged from the pool. Warderdle was shown spiraling upwards through the vortex and gritting its teeth as it tried to hold on. Cedra, meanwhile, had emerged its head from the water to see the proceedings. Use rapid spin to help you out of there, Warderdle. Ash hollered. Despite how dizzy it already was, Warderdle withdrew into its shell and began spinning rapidly. Combined with the spinning of the twister, its shell was soon nothing more than a blur. Eventually, the constant force of the spinning threw it out of the vortex, and Warderdle's shell became a spinning projectile straight towards Cedra. Cedra was a very fast Pokemon, but Warderdle was hardly anything but a blur. Mandy or Cedra had no time to react before the shell collided with Cedra, knocking it backwards. For a change, Warderdle then smashed into the water and kept going due being unable to stop quickly from moving so fast. Warderdle didn't let that deter it, however. In fact, it used its spinning shell to keep its momentum going so it could match Cedra's speed. Go after it with agility once more, Mandy called. Cedra soon disappeared underwater as the two Pokemon were nothing but blurs in the water once more. The two blurs appeared to be trading blows back and forth underwater, with neither side seeming to want to give in. Both Pokemon emerged from the water, panting. They had both done a number to each other under the water. My Cedra has won many battles thanks to its speed, Mandy commented. Your Warderdle is no match for it. Use agility again, Cedra. We'll just have to slow it down then. Warderdle, Bubble Beam. Ash shouted. Warderdle launched a stream of bubbles from its mouth straight at Cedra, but the dragon Pokemon easily moved to the side and continued coming towards Warderdle. The turtle Pokemon once more launched a bubble beam but missed terribly yet again. Watch out, Warderdle! Ash yelled. Warderdle tried to think back to the training it's done with Ash. It never really had been equipped to deal with super fast opponents, but it could certainly use it now. It briefly remembered how Ash had Charizard focus on moving targets when it was a Charmander. The key was to try to predict Cedra's movements. If it shot to the left, Cedra would move to the right. If it shot to the right, Cedra would move to the left. It had to fake out Cedra. Warderdle then saw Cedra was almost upon it and acted quickly. It took a deep breath and went to shoot its bubble beam towards the left, and as expected, Cedra moved to the right. It's exactly what Warderdle wanted. It whipped its head in the other direction quicker than the eye could see and sprayed a good deal upon Cedra. The foaminess of the bubbles caused it to trip up. The dragon Pokemon went spiraling in the air and unable to stop itself. Great job, Warderdle. Now use Skull Bash. Ash yelled. Warderdle withdrew into its shell and shot into the air after Cedra. As soon as it reached the dragon Pokemon, Warderdle stuck its head out of its shell and rammed it into Cedra with all its might. Cedra went sailing back towards the ground and slammed into the platform, but Ash wasn't done yet. Finish with Aqua Tail, he shouted. Warderdle then descended upon Cedra while swinging its tail like a viscous wave in a storm. Despite not being able to escape the attack, both Cedra and Mandy let out a smirk. You know what to do, Cedra, Mandy said. Seadra nodded and immediately pricked up its fins. Wartortle saw this and tried to withdraw the attack, but it wasn't able to in time. The aqua tail slammed into the Seadra, causing a rush of water to spray up all around them and rain all over the battlefield. When everything became clearer, both Pokémon were on the platform. Seadra was on the platform, knocked out. Wartortle wasn't unable to fight, but it looked to be in bad condition. It was on its hands and knees panting heavily, and it looked a bit sick. Seadra must have poisoned Wartortle with its fins, Ash thought as he looked on with worry at Wartortle. This is incredible, folks. Ash has taken down 2 of Mandy's Pokémon without losing 1 Pokémon yet. Could this possibly be a one-sided battle? Then again, Wartortle appears to be in bad condition. The announced boomed through the speaker. Oh, poor Wartortle, Misty moaned as she saw the distressed Pokémon. Mandy knew that the situation was hopeless, so he had Seadra poison Wartortle so its health would stay down. Brock muttered. Don't worry about fighting anymore, Wartortle. You did a great job fighting Seadra. Ash yelled to it. Yaar, it mumbled before coughing. Ash hated to see his Pokémon like this, so he took out his Pokeball and recalled Wartortle. There was no way he was going to keep making it battle in that condition. It beat Seadra and tried its best. That's what mattered. Ash was surprised when he started to hear people chant his name. He looked around in confusion and saw many people standing up in their seats while clapping and cheering. They were actually rooting for him. Before the match started, they were all cheering for Mandy instead, but now the tides have turned. Ash couldn't help but blush at all the attention he was getting. Mandy seemed to notice this, too, and got an angry expression on his face before taking a deep breath to calm himself. Ash couldn't help but smile a little on the inside at seeing Mandy taken off his high horse a little bit. Now, Mandy only has 1 Pokémon left to choose. Will he be able to perform like his tricks and make a magical comeback? The judge asked rhetorically. The answer is he can and he will, Mandy said as he took out another Pokeball. Let's see if any of your Pokémon can handle this one. Ash gave a hard stare at Mandy, wondering what Pokémon could be his last one. May I present to you my Pokémon fans, my newly evolved Crobat. Mandy announced as he dramatically threw his ball up in the air to release the purple bat Pokémon. Ash frowned deeply upon seeing the Pokémon. He remembered he had faced one of these at Koga's gym. If there was one thing Ash remembered about Crobat, it was how blindingly fast it was. Haunter had only been able to beat it by using moves that never miss. Unfortunately, Ash didn't have Haunter with him or any other Pokémon that knew never miss attacks. He really had his work cut out for him right now. He then quickly went over his options in his head. Hitmonchan was able to punch really fast, but it wouldn't do well in the water and it was weak to flying attacks. Ash wanted to give his Dratini a taste of battle since it appeared to be ready, but it was still too timid and didn't have the power to take on a frightening Pokémon like Crobat. It would be eaten alive by that thing, and Ash didn't think Kingler or Wartortle would last much longer, either. He had to go with somebody fresh. The only other option he had was Aerodactyl or Pikachu. Pikachu could no doubt match power with Crobat, and its electric attacks could help it quite a bit, but Ash had relied too much in the past on Pikachu and needed to form that amazing bond with his other Pokémon, too. Ash glanced at the yellow rodent, and it seemed to agree with what he said. Ash needed to use Aerodactyl, or he would never properly bond with it. Ever since he and Aerodactyl had talked, the two had gotten along really well. The prehistoric Pokémon had a very friendly disposition when it wasn't rampaging and trying to kill everybody. If Ash used it, this would be their first true battle together and be quite risky. On the other hand, Aerodactyl was the only other one of his Pokémon that had the power and speed to face Crobat. Taking a deep breath and crossing his fingers that he and Aerodactyl could work together, Ash made his decision. Go, Aerodactyl! Ash shouted as he threw the pokeball forward. Quite a few people screamed in terror once they saw the prehistoric Pokemon appear from its pokeball and begin flying around the stadium. Some people ducked for cover while a few actually ran for the exit. Ash knew that Aerodactyl wasn't out to eat them. It was just stretching its wings for the battle. These people didn't know that, though. Once it felt warmed up enough, Aerodactyl landed on one of the platforms and gave loud cry to show it was ready to fight. Amazing. The young man from Pallet Town actually has an Aerodactyl in his possession. He is just full of surprises, isn't he, folks? The judge yelled, but Ash could tell his voice was shaking slightly. Was everyone scared of his Aerodactyl? Even Mandy looked a little taken aback. Aerodactyl? I was almost sure Ash would use Pikachu, Misty said. Ash told me he had promised to use as many of his Pokemon as he could in the Pokemon League at the Trainers' Banquet, Richie stated. He told me about all the incredible moments he has shared with his Pikachu and other Pokemon he's earned. He hasn't really created any good memories with some of his other Pokemon so far, though. Aerodactyl was one of the ones he mentioned. Yeah. Like any good trainer, Ashy Boy wants all of his Pokemon to feel equally special, Gary agreed. Serena watched with a firm expression on her face. She knew Ash had taken a big risk by doing this. This would be Ash and Aerodactyl's first battle together, and it was against a clearly strong Crobat. She saw the logic in using Aerodactyl over his other Pokemon but couldn't help but feel apprehensive about how well those two could play off each other. She then shook her head of these thoughts. If Ash thought he and Aerodactyl could win this match, then so did she. Alright, Aerodactyl. Let's show everyone how far along we've come since Cinnabar Island. Are you ready? Ash asked it. Aero! It cried happily. Ash felt a smile curl to its lips as a murmur of confusion spread throughout the stadium. A joyful cry and smile clearly wasn't what they were expecting to come from such a terrifying Pokemon. It was the same reaction Ash and his friends had when they first met Aerodactyl. The battle shall now commence. You may start. The judge announced and waved both his flags down. Fly into air, Crobat! Mandy yelled. After it, Aerodactyl! Ash yelled, too. Both Pokemon shot up in the air much faster than one would expect. Ash did briefly remember that both Crobat and Aerodactyl were some of the fastest Pokemon in existence. But quickly pushed a thought like that away. Since they were so fast, Ash would need to keep a trained eye so he knew where Aerodactyl would be at all times. As of right now, they were just blurs moving through the air. Both trainers are taking a divergence away from the water field by taking the battle sky high. What could they be planning? The announcer commented while the remaining crowd who didn't run away cheered. The audience is cheering, Crobat. I say we give them quite a show with your acrobatics, Mandy said with a flip of his long hair. Crobat soon began doing all sorts of tricks in midair while still maintaining its speed. This erratic pattern threw off Aerodactyl as it stopped to look wildly around at its nimble target. Before it knew what happened, it was struck from behind. Aerodactyl cried out in aggravation, turning around to snap at Crobat, but it was already gone. We aren't going to get anywhere if we let Crobat continue doing all of those tricks, Ash thought. He then called out, try your ancient power to form a barrier around yourself. Aerodactyl nodded, and a plethora of rocks was soon summoned from midair that seemed to be suspended by some mysterious power. The rocks then closed in around Aerodactyl to protect it from any of Crobat's sneaky maneuvers. Sure enough, a few seconds later, Crobat came in for another attack but instead ended up crashing right into a rock. It then shook itself and slowly backed off. Though mainly used as a damage-inflicting attack, It appeared ancient power could also be used for defense. Great. Now pelt those rocks at Crobat. Ash hollered. Dodge it, Crobat, Mandy commanded with narrowed eyes. Aerodactyl cried out and hurled the suspended rocks at Crobat. Despite hurting itself from crashing, Crobat darted out of harm's way and was soon nothing more than a blur. Again. Now use Air Cutter, Mandy said next. Crobat stopped for just the briefest of moments and flapped its forewings before darting off again. A physical form of wind soared towards Aerodactyl and struck it in the chest. Aerodactyl growled again as Ash issued another command. Try to keep up with Crobat with your agility. Ash hollered. Aerodactyl nodded again before dashing after Crobat. If it was a blur before, it certainly was now. The prehistoric Pokémon soon caught up with Crobat and rammed its stone head into it. Like Crobat before it, Aerodactyl darted away immediately and became a blur. Looks like the tables have turned, Mandy. How does it feel having a Pokémon that's faster than yours for a change? Ash asked. Humph. You think so, do you? Use Swift, Crobat, Mandy smirked. Crobat stopped moving and slashed its wings again. This time, however, a bunch of glowing forms of energy in star shapes came out. They followed Aerodactyl before striking it in all sides, causing it to roar in aggravation again. Never miss attacks, Ash mumbled to himself. Aerodactyl's speed doesn't give it much of an advantage as long as Crobat has that move. It's the same strategy one had to help me beat Koga. Use Giga Drain, Crobat, Mandy told it. Crobat immediately flew up to Aerodactyl and latched onto it with its wings. It then bit into Aerodactyl, causing it to roar in pain and appeared to start sucking the energy out of it. Try to bat it away with wing attack. Ash hollered. Aerodactyl lifted one of its large scaly wings and tried to slap the bat Pokémon away, but Crobat would merely reposition itself to dodge, or the attack would barely graze it. Despite this, Aerodactyl continued swinging away, but the situation looked pretty grim again. Come on, Aerodactyl. You can do it. Ash encouraged. Aerodactyl continued to howl in pain as Crobat continued to suck the energy out of it. The prehistoric Pokémon could feel itself getting weaker, and the worst part was this parasite was taking its energy for itself. Aerodactyl didn't like that one bit. It then began to become a little bit more violent in its attempts to try to swat at Crobat. As it felt more of its strength leave it, that only made Aerodactyl angrier. It wanted to trust Ash in this battle and fight its anger, but its wild instincts were starting to take over. Rather than just try to get Crobat away from it, Aerodactyl began to snap at it, too, not really caring which part of Crobat's body it hit. Upon seeing this, Crobat instantly let go of Aerodactyl and backed away in fear for its life. It wanted to win for its arrogant trainer, but it didn't want its body cut in half in the process. It then sweat dropped as Aerodactyl turned an evil eye towards it. Ash's pupils shrunk at seeing that. He remembered that look. It was the same look Aerodactyl had right before it went crazy on Cinnabar Island. Aerodactyl. Wait. Just take a deep breath. Ash yelled out on seeing what was about to happen. What was going on? He thought he and Aerodactyl were past this. Why did you stop your Giga Drain, Crobat? I did not give you that order. Use it again so we can win the match. Mandy commanded angrily to it. Wait. Don't do that. Ash shouted at Mandy. Why not? Is my Crobat too much for your Aerodactyl to handle? If you can't bear the thought of seeing your poor Pokémon knocked out, then you shouldn't be in the Pokémon League in the first place. Mandy said arrogantly. It's not about that, you idiot. Ash hollered, but it was too late. Crobat darted towards Aerodactyl, but the prehistoric Pokémon flew out of the way. Aerodactyl turned and saw the Crobat chasing it and gave a roar of aggravation. then to Ash's horror, it began charging up a hyper beam before shooting it at Crobat. The bat Pokemon let out a screech of surprise and clumsily tried to dodge the attack. The hyper beam hit its wing rather than its body, but it still hurt it. The hyper beam continued going, though. Everyone watched in terror as the hyper beam struck one of the walls of the stadium, causing an explosion. Aerodactyl. Stop. You're going to put the people in danger. Ash screamed at it. Pikachu. The yellow rodent called desperately. Aerodactyl didn't listen, though. It shot another hyper beam at Crobat, who clumsily dodged the attack again. This time the hyper beam struck the giant electronic screen in the stadium, which completely destroyed it. There was nothing left but a large sparking screen with a gaping hole in the middle of it. People screamed as various bits of electrical wires rained down on them, even shocking a few. If nothing before had caused people to leave the scene, that certainly had. The tide then turned, as it was now Crobat trying to get away from Aerodactyl. The bat Pokemon flew back closer to the ground and chanced a look back only to see Aerodactyl's jaws about to clamp down on it. Crobat spun out of the way again. The two Pokemon then began fly everywhere, sometimes right over the remaining but panicking audience, causing them to duck for cover. Aerodactyl. Return. Ash shouted as he tried to recall the Pokemon, but its wild movements caused the red beam to keep missing. Aerodactyl continued screeching in rage as it chased Crobat before shooting another hyper beam. No. This can't be happening, Ash thought in horror as he watched Aerodactyl in its attempt to defeat Crobat. This was almost a repeat of what had happened on Cinnabar Island. Only now it was at the Pokemon League. Aerodactyl was on a rampage once again.